And we are good to go.
Thank you. So I'm going to call this council and committee meeting to order. Again, although I provided the acknowledgement, the Indigenous people's acknowledgement at the beginning of the special council meeting, I'll repeat that the land upon which we're all located throughout our community is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the Credit and Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in our community and add to its richness. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Zanko.
We have a long agenda this evening, so I'm going to keep the announcements relatively brief. I just wanted to provide a bit of an update on the COVID-19 situation. About a week and a half ago, there was an event that occurred in Fort Erie, resulted in a large number of cases locally, so that we saw quite an increase over about a 7 or 8 day period in Fort Erie. That's kind of stabilized now, but we continue to have a case, 2 cases, 3 cases a day in Fort Erie, which is not untypical of most of the other municipalities, some of which are having higher numbers for a variety of reasons. The vaccinations are coming in very slowly, but in Fort Erie, we're trying to provide more opportunities for individuals to become vaccinated through pop-up clinics, one of which will be held at the Central Station. And is that September the 21st, Chief?
You are correct, sir, from 10 until 6.
So we'll keep on our website, we will keep alerting the public to opportunities to get vaccinations in town. There are pharmacies that are also continuing when they have supply to provide vaccinations. And it's terribly important that we all continue to follow the public health guidelines and encourage others to become vaccinated, because that's the surest way that we get back to normal and keep our community safe. Today at Fort Erie Racetrack, the annual Rick Schuler Stakes race was held, and hard to believe, but it was, I believe this was the 7th annual, it'll be the 6th because they had to forego it last year. But it's hard to believe that it's almost 7 years now since Rick Schuler was with us. And for those who aren't familiar with Rick Schuler, he was a councillor in the town of Fort Erie from 2003 until 2014, was reelected in 2014 with, I think, over 70% of the vote in Ward 2, and then unfortunately succumbed to cancer before the end of the year, which was terribly unfortunate. He was able to participate in the inaugural meeting in December that year, but steadily worsened. And so I had an opportunity to, again, visit with his wife, Sue, family members and friends at the Fort Erie Racetrack. I have to say that I left a donation to the track at the parimutuel stand, but former councillor Sandy Annunziata actually won, and it was a bit of a long shot. So he did well. Some of the other family members did well, but yeah, this is just a great opportunity to reconnect and remember a truly unique individual in Fort Erie, and an individual who touched a lot of people, was involved in a lot of activities, and will always be remembered. I should say that tomorrow is the Prince of Wales Stakes at the Fort Erie Racetrack. I understand that Councillor Noyes, you're going to be there with your husband. And so hopefully it'll be a good day, and hopefully your fortunes will be better than mine. We all know that there's a federal election that's going on right now. The final date for voting is next Monday, September the 20th. There have been pre-election day voting going on in the advanced polls in various locations throughout town. I understand that the numbers have been high for advanced voting, and there have been, I think it was 800,000 requests for mail-in ballots so far across the country. So it's terribly important that we all vote. This is one of the main rights that we have in Canada, and since we've been talking frequently recently about rights and obligations, this is a tremendous right for anyone who lives in a democracy. And it's also an obligation for us to ensure that our democracy stays strong. And then finally, tonight was supposed to be the first meeting when I was going to be accompanied by other councillors in the council chamber. We've had some technical difficulties, and so We're still doing a Zoom meeting, but next week, September the 20th, should be a resumption of in-chamber council meetings, at least for the members of council who wish to be here and some of the staff members. And eventually we'll be working our way back, hopefully, to having real live people as spectators and participants in our council chamber. Okay, that's it for announcements. There is no addendum this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, there is an upcoming public meeting for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 3285 Thunder Bay Road. That will be held on Monday, October the 4th at 6 p.m. The information report in the council chambers, and the information report will be available by 5 p.m. on September 29th, 2021. I should say, though, that the public will be participating by via Zoom for that meeting. There are 3 public meetings this evening, all of which will be conducted digitally through Zoom. The format is that I will request a member of staff to provide background information. Members of council can then question any of the information provided by the staff member who provides that. Then I will ask the clerk if there have been any late submissions that weren't part of the information report contained in our council agenda this evening. Thereafter, I'll ask if the proponent wishes to speak or comment, then anyone in favor, anyone opposed. If you are wanting to participate in this meeting, you would click in. You will remain muted until such time as you are admitted into the meeting. If you wish to be admitted to the meeting, you raise your virtual hand on an iPad that can be found in the top right corner. On a laptop, it's I think it's on the bottom of your screen. If you're using a telephone, it's someplace. Mr. Butler, where is it on a telephone? *9.
If you're phoning in, it'll be *9. And if you're just on your phone using the Zoom app, it's somewhere in the corner.
Okay, so you're like me, it's someplace there. And then you'll be brought into the meeting by Mr. Butler. You can then provide your comments or questions to council. And then if any members of council have a question or questions of you, they will ask them, and then you'll be permitted to leave the meeting. Have I left anything out that's germane, Madam Clerk?
Sorry, yes, there's just the one about being a panelist. There'll be a window that pops up. It's something new. And you
Okay.
click yes.
Okay, if you want to participate. Okay, so having gone through that, the first public meeting is with respect to 4197 Niagara Parkway. I see it's called Niagara River Parkway in Fort Erie. It's actually called Niagara Parkway. I don't know how this is creeping in Niagara Falls. It's called Niagara River Parkway, but maybe staff can take a look at that. And we're going to be receiving, council will be receiving comments from Anamika Dilwaria, our senior development planner. Ms. Dilwaria, good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship. So with your permission, can I share my screen now?
Absolutely.
An application for a zoning official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Curtis Thompson, who represents San Prakash Dhillon, Aman, Upal, Shaminder Dhillon, and Kuldeep, owners of the subject property known as 4197 Niagara Parkway. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the creation of a residential building lot for a future single detached dwelling. Notification for tonight's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the August 19, 2021 edition of Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of the complete application and public meeting on the same date. This is an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The subject lands are located on the south side of Niagara Parkway between Black Creek Road and Switch Road. The subject lands are located within urban area and are in the Douglastown Black Creek neighborhood. This slide shows the location of the subject lands. The subject lands are located on the south side of Niagara Parkway and front onto Service Road number 14. The subject lands currently contain a single detached dwelling known as 4197 Niagara Parkway. Niagara Parkway and Niagara River are located to the north. Hydro Corridor and single detached dwellings are located to the south. To the east is Switch Road and single detached dwelling. To the west is Black Creek Road and single detached dwellings. This slide shows the current official plan designation for the subject lands. The lands are designated low density residential on Schedule A of the official plan and are in Douglastown Black Creek secondary plan. The low density designation allows single detached dwelling, semi-detached and duplex. The official plan requires all lands within urban area to be serviced by municipal sanitary and water services. The plan allows existing development on private services within urban area to continue until such time the municipal services are available. The subject property is serviced by municipal sanitary services. However, municipal water main is not available along Niagara River Parkway. This slide shows the existing natural features on the subject property. The subject lands are located within the environmental corridor that is located along Niagara River. As the proposed dwelling will be sufficiently set back from the Niagara River, the proposed development will have minimal impact on the environmental corridor. This slide shows the current zoning of the property. The lands are zoned waterfront residential. The waterfront residential zone allows single detached dwelling. Section 6.16 of the zoning bylaw requires all development to be serviced by both municipal and water and sanitary services. The subject lands are serviced by municipal sanitary service, but do not have access to municipal water. This slide shows a servicing map of the area. The lands located between Black Creek Road and Switch Road have access to the municipal sanitary services, but do not have water main. This slide shows a proposed development. The proposed lot is shown as part 2, and the remnant lot is shown as part 1. Both part 1 and part 2 exceed the bylaw requirements for lot frontage, front yard depth, interior side yard width, and the rear yard depth. The bylaw requirements are shown in black text, and the proposed regulations are shown in the blue text. For example, the bylaw requires a minimum lot frontage of 18 meters, and the applicant is proposing a lot frontage of 28.92 for part 1 and 25.05 for part 2. As you can see, the applicant is proposing to exceed the bylaw requirement for all the zoning regulations. The slide also shows the front yard depth of the abutting properties, which range from approximately 7 meters for the property to the west and 2 meters to the property to the east. A public information open house was held on July 14th and was attended by staff, owner, and his agent. 4 area residents attended the meeting as well. The resident had 4 major concerns. The first one was the reduced interior side yard. The abutting easterly property owner had concern regarding the reduced interior side yard. The applicant was initially proposing an interior side yard of 2.2 meters. However, since the meeting, the applicant is willing to provide the requested interior side yard of 3 meters. The second concern was the size of the proposed lot is not compatible with the existing lot fabric. The residents had concerns that the proposed and the remnant parcels do not match the lot fabric in the area. The applicant's agent mentioned that both the proposed and the remnant parcels exceed the bylaw requirements regarding both the minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area. The third concern was regarding the use of the subject property for short-term rental. The applicant agent mentioned at the open house that the owner is proposing to construct a single detached dwelling on the property. And if in future the owner wishes to use the dwelling as a vacation rental, he will be required to obtain license from the town and will be subject to the regulations outlined in the license. However, since then, the owner has agreed to not use both the existing and the proposed dwelling for short-term rental. An email from the applicant's agent confirming the same has been circulated to council. The last concern were regarding the servicing for the proposed dwelling. One of the area resident had concern regarding the capacity in the existing sanitary sewer to accommodate the additional flow generated by the new dwelling. Staff has reviewed the service in concern and can confirm that there is sufficient capacity in the existing sanitary sewer to accommodate the additional flow. These are some of the pictures of the subject property. This is looking at the proposed lot. Looking east on Service Road 14. Looking west on Service Road number 14. Abutting dwelling to the east. Looking north on Niagara River. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dilwaria. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you for your presentation. And can you just again go over again the short-term rental, just to make sure I understood it correctly, that both the proposed new home and the existing home, either one of them will be short-term rental, and that will be made. How can we ensure that that goes on through the ages as the years pass?
To the councillor. The applicant has confirmed in an email that he would not be using either the existing or the proposed dwelling for a short-term rental. And in order to safeguard and in order to ensure that we are able to achieve that thing, we would be including that in the site-specific zoning regulation that would say short-term rental would be prohibited on these properties.
Thank you for that.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further, thank you.
Any other members of council? Mr. Orr, I wonder if you could go back to the overhead slide that showed the parcel and then the adjacent parcels. It's an aerial view of the area.
Sure, thank you.
I believe this parcel was outlined in yellow.
So, this one, Your Worship?
Yep, that one there. So this appears to be one of the wider parcels in that vicinity. The one right adjacent to it to the north would be approximately similar type size. And I expect that if this rezoning were permitted to facilitate a severance, we could be expecting similar type opportunity to the north. You don't have to answer that. I'm just thinking out loud. Could you go to the next slide that you had in your presentation? Down in the bottom right corner on Switch Road, there's a small parcel that is adjacent to the hydro corridor. That's correct, right there. Was that the subject? Do you know if that was the subject of a severance, or was that an existing lot that has recently been built on?
I do not know, Your Worship. I do not recall any consent application on that, but I would have to check. I don't have the information.
I wonder if you could do that. I would appreciate that. And just for clarity, what is so the current zoning waterfront residential provides for 18-meter frontage?
That's correct, Your Worship.
And does this waterfront residential zoning apply all the way down the river, or is it here because, is it 18 meters here because there's water service? I mean, sorry.
So the waterfront residential would extend between Black Creek Road and Switch Road, and anything to the east is within the waterfront rural residential.
I see. That's because this is within the urban boundary.
That's correct, yeah.
And any parcels on the parkway within the urban boundary would have a similar type zoning to this?
These parcels which are within the part of urban area have the similar zoning.
Right. So I'm thinking further down within the urban boundary, coming out of Fort Erie or towards Thompson Road, those parcels are all within the urban boundary. Most of them are 100 to 200 feet wide. So I guess I could check the zoning on that to see what their zoning is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of council have any questions? Could you maybe unshare your screen now? Yes. Any other questions? If not, then Madam Clerk, I think I misspoke. I think usually I let the proponent speak before I go to you, or
Correct.
yes, okay. So I will let the proponent or an agent on behalf of the proponent address council if they wish. And
Your Worship, I have Curtis Thompson coming into the meeting right now.
Okay.
Applicant's agent.
Good evening, Mr. Thompson.
The floor mine.
You hear us?
Good evening, council and staff. I'm Curtis Thompson. I'm a planner with the consulting firm Better Neighborhoods. Represent the owners at 4197 Niagara Parkway. I'm going to share my screen here. Just bear with me. I'm not going to go over the site context. Anamika covered it quite thoroughly. So the property is in the urban area. It currently lacks municipal water, but does have access to municipal sanitary sewer. And the purpose of the application long-term is to apply to the Committee of Adjustment to sever a new lot. However, in order to do that, a site-specific exemption is warranted under the official plan and the zoning bylaw to allow for partial private services. This image here just illustrates at a high level what the lot geometry might look like. And here's a
Thompson, if I could just interrupt, we are still seeing your site context slide within your PowerPoint screen itself.
Sorry about that. I'm looking at the wrong screen here. Got 3 monitors going. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is the what the approximate lot geometry will look like going forward at the Committee of Adjustment, subject to the approval of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Here's the site plan, which illustrates, at least conceptually, what the potential building envelope might look like with the amenity area and the driveway. It's been designed this way in an effort to preserve the existing trees on the property, and the driveway's been oriented to that effect as well. And in an effort to preserve the neighbor's privacy to the south, the garage is shown on the southern flank of the building. Furthermore, on that note, at the open house, there was some concern expressed by the neighbors about the 2.2 meter side yard setback that was proposed. Our client and ourselves are amenable to voluntarily increasing that side yard setback through the site specific zoning exception to 3 meters. The only thing that should be noted though, with the larger setbacks, there's the percentage of the wall openings that are permitted under the building code pro. Whereas if the setbacks are closer, the likelihood of having windows is reduced. So it's just something to bear in mind. Although in this case, it won't be much of an issue regardless, considering the garage is proposed on the southern flank. We've got, here are preliminary conceptual elevations of what the dwelling may look like from Service Road 14 and the Parkway. And Anamika covered the official plan designation. So it's a very scoped official plan amendment that's dealing with the request for partial private services, specifically water, which we're proposing be provided through an underground cistern tank. The proposed lot complies with all other performance standards in the zoning bylaw, minimum lot area, frontage, all the applicable setbacks, height limits. And again, the exception is exclusively to deal with, at this time anyways, the request for partial private water servicing.
Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, I see that we've got a chat notice that someone who is trying to zoom in here can't hear the sound. I don't know if that's still an issue or not.
Your Worship, I think that was from earlier when the meeting just started and there wasn't discussion happening yet. I think there was just no one speaking.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Please continue, Mr. Thompson.
Sure thing. So in terms of requested amendments to the zoning, other than the reason we're here was just for the request for private water servicing, there would also be an amendment that's come up now to increase the side yard setback to 3 meters, as well as to prohibit short-term rentals in perpetuity on subject lands, which is dealt with through, I believe, a standalone bylaw in Fort Erie, but can be covered through the site-specific zoning amendment as well. And I'm available to answer any questions for council or staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Do any members of council have any questions? The question that I had, Mr. Thompson, I note that there was some discussion about maximum gross floor area. What can you tell us about that? That's referred to in your email from today.
Mm-hmm. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, one of the neighbors requested that a zoning provision be added to limit the maximum floor area of the dwelling. Currently, it had been shown the envelope would provide a 3,000 square foot floor area in a 2-story built form. We're not of the opinion that it's justified in this case, as the zoning bylaw is silent on that type of standard. It does actually provide a minimum floor area, and on top of that, there are, although the houses that are directly adjacent are on the smaller side, at least for the typical Niagara Parkway character, there are some larger format houses not too far from this one. And we're of the opinion that 3,000 square foot floor area is by no means a mansion or anything like that.
Okay, so this is a 3,000 square foot conceptual building?
Through the mayor. Yeah, it's preliminary at this point. The actual detailed design may change.
Is there maximum coverage for this parcel for a building?
Your worship, we can't hear you.
Is there maximum lot coverage for this building, for this parcel, the proposed parcel under the zoning?
Through the chair, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the maximum lot coverage is 40% in this zone.
Does that include ancillary buildings, or is that just for the main building?
Through the chair, again, staff, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that would be for the entire property, so it would include accessory buildings.
And then I note that there was also a request, I believe, by someone that there be an additional front yard setback. From the graphic that you showed, it appears that the proposed new house on the proposed new lot has a similar setback to the existing house to the north. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Any other questions by members of council? If not, sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Through you to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, in regards to the potential 3,000 square footage gross floor area, does that include the garage and the what it looks from the picture that you had like a living quarters above, or not?
Through the mayor. That's thank you for pointing that out. The 3,000 square foot looks like it was derived from the dimensions that are shown on the site plan of the house proper, but there may be an inconsistency there with the elevation plan, which if I'm being honest, I came to work for this company not that long ago, but I believe those elevation plans are maybe out of touch with the goal there for the floor area. So in this case, the 3,000 square foot would not include that living space that was proposed above the garage. But again, like the floor plans could also provide a loft in that garage that might not necessarily be associated with the house, but it depends on how the zoning defines it.
Councillor Noyes, anything further?
Again, I know the residents are concerned about the size of the house being out of character with their immediate neighborhood. So I'm hoping that you keep that in mind when when you move from concept to actually site drawings. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Madam Clerk, we'll go to you if there were any late arriving messages that haven't been part of the report to council.
I do have for your worship. They're in opposition. I don't have any in favor. I don't know if there's anyone in the waiting room, perhaps.
Can you provide us with the names, and then we can ascertain whether those individuals wish to address us, because I don't want to have you read what they say and then have them tell us what they say.
The first is Herb Perk.
No,
No, okay. Ernie and Pat Lapp.
no,
Robert Bates
no,
and Paul Callow.
no.
Okay.
Okay, then perhaps you could proceed to read those into the record, Madam Clerk.
Okay, the first one I have, your worship, is Herb Perk. He resides at 4169 Niagara Parkway. To members of council of town of Fort Erie, on behalf of a number of local residents and neighbors, we wish to lodge our objections to the combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. More specifically, application numbers 350-302-0124 and 350-309-0524. I'm writing this letter personally because many neighbors have voiced their reluctance to sign their names to a public letter for fear of reprisals. We understand the need for intensification from a policy point of view, as it is critical to town revenue and indeed is good for the environment in general. However, the houses in the area immediately surrounding the property, and indeed the entire Douglastown Black Creek secondary plan, are relatively small compared to other properties on the parkway. Unassuming, well set back, and well spaced, giving a rural look to the section of the parkway. Whatever intensification is approved, it needs to be consistent with the surrounding environs. We recognize the rights of the applicants to apply for the aforementioned amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw. The applicants asked for site-specific variances related to a site-specific waterfront residential WR zone to permit new development within the urban area on private water service, and have submitted a site plan that impacts a longstanding homeowner at 4197 Niagara Parkway. Her rights for a quiet, tranquil home in which she has resided for almost 40 years needs to be respected as well. While the neighbors would favor no change, we concede that this is unlikely and leads us to examine what actions or restrictions and requirements the town could make to the future severed lot to maintain the quiet, tranquil enjoyment of their properties. We trust that council will carefully consider the 4 recommendations seriously, as they, in our view, will address most of the concerns of the homeowners in the immediate area of impact. Attached to this is a resolution to members of town council regarding the application. Whereas the applicant utilized the property for income on short-term rentals through Airbnb and occasional long-term rentals, the applicant did not monitor the activities of these renters and ignored complaints of late night partying, excessive noise, garbage being scattered on the property, and lack of maintenance by the owner. 3, when COVID restrictions were imposed on short-term rentals, the applicant was cautioned that his continued renting of the property for short-term rentals had been suspended as a COVID precaution by the province, was not permitted, and indeed illegal. The applicant continued privately to utilize the property for short-term rentals. In January of 2021, a double murder at the property shocked the neighborhood. The applicant had rented 4197 Niagara Parkway on a short-term basis to the people associated with this crime, again illegally due to provincial COVID restrictions. Renting to people who are also prepared to ignore these COVID restrictions showed a complete disregard for the law by both the applicant and the renter. It put neighbors and local citizens at risk and undermined the sense of safety and tranquility which the community had always enjoyed. 5, this application comes on the heels of a lengthy pattern of disregard for the law by the applicant and puts his credibility in question. He has demonstrated an inability to follow the law. He has disregarded safe neighborhood norms. He has deliberately misrepresented his intentions. He has proven his oral intentions have no credibility. The town council should not rely on the content of his written submissions or his oral intentions. 6, after the information meeting called by the town planning department in August, the applicant indicated directly to Ms. Harrod the following: A, he agreed to a 3-meter setback from Ms. Harrod's property line. B, he agreed to a substantial front yard setback that would not compromise her privacy and view. 7, the application also includes a reference to a future dwelling of 2 stories and 3,000 square feet, which is totally out of scale with the immediate neighborhood, both in size and proximity to a neighbor's property. Therefore, be it resolved that in the event town council approves a site-specific official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for the property known as 4197 Niagara Parkway, such approval should also include the following site-specific amendments to be registered on title. 1, that the side lot setback between the subject property 4197 Niagara Parkway and the adjacent property 4189 Niagara Parkway be no less than 3 meters. 2, that the front lot setback of the new lot be not less than 15.9 meters. 3, that the maximum dwelling size be no greater than 2,200 square feet, nor greater than 2 stories. And lastly, 4, that short-term rentals be prohibited on the newly created lot.
Madam Clerk, if I can interrupt, we do have one hand that was raised just as you started to read that first submission. I wonder if it's possible it may be one of those 4 pieces of correspondence we received. Did you want me to bring that person in, Your Worship?
Let's identify the individual, and if that individual is one of the people that have submitted something in writing, then the clerk can pass on that one, read in the other 2. So let's find out who 41697 is.
I'll bring them in now. Hi there, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your video.
At this point, could we have your name for the record, please?
It's Herb Perk.
Okay, so Mr. Perk, the clerk just read your lengthy letter into the record. I don't know if there's anything in addition that you would like to state to council. We don't really want you to be repeating what has already been said.
No, I'm quite happy not to repeat what has been said. I believe that the applicant has dealt with at least 3 of the 4 motions dealing with the prohibited side short-term rentals, the front yard setback of 15.9 meters, and the side lot reference of 3 meters. And that satisfies 3 out of the 4 motions that I'm recommending. The 4th one, however, is the size of the building. The square footage of the building is totally out of scope with any of the properties along the Niagara Parkway from Netherby Road to Switch Road. And something in the order of 2,200 square feet would be more typical of building size or square footage size of the property in question. And I would hope that the council would deal with that accordingly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perk. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Perk? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Through you to Mr. Perk. Mr. Perk, I don't know if you heard if you were tuned in earlier to the meeting, that not only is the short-term rental on the new property not going to happen, on the existing property, it's also no longer going to be a short-term rental. I don't know if you heard that.
I did not, but I'm happy that that's the case.
Yes, I'm very happy also. Thank you. That was my question. I guess the other thing about the size of the house, there was some, I guess the word I'm thinking of is uncertainty with Mr. Thompson in regards to the actual footage. Because of the area above the garage, he wasn't sure whether that was actually taken into consideration or not. So I guess there still needs to be a little bit more information on that. If he won't, is there a happy medium between 2,200 and 3,000 that you think that perhaps the neighbors would find more amenable, because it is a 2-story house?
22 would be terrific.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the happy medium. Mr. Perk, you had mentioned something about 15.9 meters as a setback. I believe the zoning requires 15 meters, and that's what the conceptual drawing or plan shows. That seems to be a setback significantly more than the property immediately to the south, which is 4189. So is 15 meters, in your view, acceptable? I mean, that's the zoning.
Your worship, it is. I think that's perfectly acceptable. The question that I do have of members of council or the administrator or the planner is that, are these requirements going to be placed on title so that a future owner will be respectful of those requirements as well?
If there's an amendment to the zoning bylaw, it would become a site-specific zoning, which would mean these would all be provisions that would be part of the town's zoning bylaw. So they would, you would have to comply with those provisions when you constructed anything on the parcel.
Okay. I have Miss Deborah Herod here with me. I'm surprised that the camera isn't working. But do you have anything to add, Deborah?
No, as you know, I've been through a lot in the last 4 years since the applicants have purchased the property. My husband, the late Dr. Bruce Herod, bought the property in 1977, 1978. And I've resided there since 1983, the year we were married. I've driven up and down this parkway probably a million times. I was a Willick. My grandfather had property on Switch Road. And the prestige of the boulevard, of the parkway, was always renowned to everyone. And I'm surprised that the town is allowing these severances. My husband hired a regional planner back in the mid-'80s, and we won, because in that time, someone again wanted to sever the property beside us. And I'm very disappointed, like I said, with the town to allow this. If you allow it next door to me, then what's to stop everyone from Chippewa to Fort Erie from chickling these little tiny homes in between? And we're going to lose that prestigious tranquility, peacefulness, which I've already lost with the Airbnb beside me for 4 years. We're losing it. And I'm very disappointed. As you can see, I'm very emotional about it, because I'm the one that takes the direct impact with this beside me. I will lose more privacy. I've already lost the privacy for 4 years with this horrible Airbnb beside me. And now I'm going to lose more privacy with noise, with people, with confusion, with in and out, with the driveway. My house is not centered on 4189. My house to that building will probably be within 22 feet of each other. Whether it be a garage, whether it be a home, I don't care. It's a building there, and it really will change my lifestyle. And I'm very disappointed.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a closing comment, please?
Well, before you do that, I'd like to have Ms. Herod's address. Is it 4189 Niagara Parkway?
Yes, it is. Like I said, I've resided there since 1983, and my husband purchased in 1977 or 1998.
Thank you. Ms. Herod, I believe you're one of the individuals that provided an email to council and to the clerk. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes?
No, Your Worship, I don't have one from Ms. Herod.
I sent it to Anamika. Anamika can verify that.
Okay, so maybe that's part of the report.
Probably.
Okay, did you have anything further that you wished to say, Ms. Herod?
No, I mean, I've said all that I can say. Whatever I say doesn't impact you people at all because it's what the bylaws are. It's not how we feel. You know what? Why is this all lost in the transition of the concerns of the neighbors who are directly affected? Why is that no longer important to anybody?
Well, the mere fact that you're addressing council, Ms. Herod, is part of the public process. And councillors are sitting here listening to what you and everyone else who addresses us has to say as we try to manage our legislative responsibility in connection with an application for rezoning by another member of the public. So I appreciate your anxiety and your distress with respect to this. We're doing what we're required to do by law, and we are listening to what you have to say because that's part of our decision-making process. Mr. Herod, did you said you wanted to make a final comment?
I did, if I may. I wish to apologize to Councillor Noyes. My comment was flippant when she asked me about the size of the house. Perhaps the council can direct planning staff to survey the sizes of the houses on the Niagara Parkway from Netherby Road to Switch Road and get a sense of the size of the dwellings so that whatever dwelling is to be built on the new lot is in keeping with that.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Okay, do any members of council have, sorry, Ms. Dolch?
I apologize, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a point of clarification just to the speaker. In terms of the front yard setback, it is the zoning bylaw only requires 7.5 meters setback. The applicant is showing a 15-meter setback, but that isn't required by the bylaw. So I just wanted to be clear on that point.
That's very helpful, Ms. Dolch. So then that's something that council needs to bear in mind. This is a representation made by the applicant as part of its presentation to us. And it would be consistent with the house, the current house on what will be the remnant parcel. Thank you. Any members of council have any questions of either Mr. Perk or Ms. Herod? Okay, thank you. Both of you may be excused. So Ms. Schofield, we'll go back to you to read in the remaining letters that you had.
Yes, Your Worship. The next one is from Ernie and Pat Lapp. We wish to inform you that we will unfortunately be unable to take part in the Zoom meeting September 13th concerning the 4197 Niagara River Parkway property. We completely support all of the issues submitted by Herb Perk in a letter dated September 8, 2021 to the members of council for the town of Fort Erie. That's that one.
Did they have an address?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Next.
Okay. The next one I have is from Robert Bates. My name is Robert Bates and I live next door to the property in question. I'm opposed to the severance being proposed. In my opinion, the council passed a poorly thought out short-term rental law, which ultimately resulted in the deaths of 2 young girls next door, despite phone calls and emails from me. Our councilwoman Noyes was quoted after hearing about the murders saying, "Oh, that's the party house." To date, we have never received a reply from Ms. Noyes from any email or phone call. Large lawsuits should be anticipated by the family of the murdered girls and others as the party was illegally rented during the lockdown without oversight. This property, which may be encumbered by litigation, should not be severed. Please don't compound one mistake with another. And forward to council, Robert Bates. No address, just next door.
Thank you.
And the last one I have is from Paul Callow. I'm currently a resident of the Niagara Parkway, for which I have owned for the last 8 years. It has always been my understanding that there was a minimum lot size to build a property. This was in place to maintain an area of spacious properties that complements its proximity along the Niagara Park's land. It was this that led me and many others to seek a residence with spacious living on the Niagara Parkway. My position is that I am opposed to this amendment. There have been many conversations on this matter with those living in the area, and this feeling is shared. Lowering the lot size down to 25 meters sets a dangerous precedent that will pave the way to turning this beautiful, unique, and picturesque road into an overcrowded residential street. It is certain that once the process starts, it will be followed by many other interest groups looking to break up properties for financial gain. It is important for council to consider the motive for this amendment application and the potential damage it can do to this community. And that's the end of that one, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schofield. And Ms. Dilwari, before we go any further, I wonder if you could highlight the purpose, what is actually being requested in terms of the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendment? What is the reason that this needs to be done in conjunction with the severance?
Thank you, Your Worship. The reason for this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment is that the new lot has to be on urban services. And in this situation, the new lot would have services, would have the sanitary service, but would not have access to the water main. And that's the reason of this official plan amendment. And I would also like to mention that the question that you had asked me about the new lot that was at the corner of Switch Road, that was created through consent, and that was also subject to an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw. That was done in 2017, a similar situation.
Okay, so this particular matter that we're dealing with, if this severance were granted, the parcel would comply with the existing zoning in this area, is that correct?
That's correct.
But the reason for the amendment is it's within the urban boundary, it doesn't have municipal water.
I couldn't hear you, Your Worship.
The reason for the application to amend the official plan and the zoning bylaw is solely because the land is within the urban boundary and is not serviced with municipal water.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So let's go to anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application. Mr. Butler, could you look to see if there's anyone that raises a hand?
So now would be the time to raise your virtual hand if you are in the attendee area and wish to speak in favor of the application. I'll just note that the agent has their hand raised. Who's
other than Mr. Thompson.
I'm seeing no others, Your Worship.
Okay. So then I'll ask if there's anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or who wishes to ask any questions of members of council. Please raise your hand.
Yeah, again, now would be the time to raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing none, Your Worship.
Okay. Do any members of council have any further questions of Ms. Dilwaria on this matter? If not, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And we'll go to the next public meeting, which is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment 3399 North Shore Drive. And I have, again, Ms. Dilwaria.
It is Mr. Vanderveen, Your Worship, has just been brought in.
Mr. Vanderveen.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Vanderveen. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just going to commence sharing my screen. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 3399 North Shore Drive. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment seeks to permit severance of 2 new lots from 3399 North Shore Drive. The existing dwelling and detached garage in the front yard is planned to remain on the retained lot and will continue their current use. Several site-specific zoning regulations are also required to permit the following. Reduce setback from the 1 in 100-year flood elevation along the Lake Erie waterfront for all 3 lots. Reduce lot frontage for one of the proposed new lots. Formal recognition of an existing legal non-conforming detached garage located in the front yard that has a dwelling unit above the ground floor. to permit an existing pool and accessory building located on one of the proposed lots to remain without an associated main dwelling as a temporary use for a period of 1 year. Notification of the September 13th, 2021 public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the August 19th, 2021 edition of the Port Erie Post newspaper. In addition, all property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of complete application and public meeting on August 19th, 2021. The subject property is located in the Ridgeway Thunder Bay neighborhood of the town of Fort Erie on the south side of North Shore Drive on the Lake Erie waterfront. The following summarizes the land uses surrounding the subject property. To the north, single detached dwellings. To the south, the town's Maple Leaf Park and the Lake Erie waterfront. To the east, a town-owned laneway to access Maple Leaf Park and single detached dwellings along the Lake Erie waterfront. To the west, single detached dwellings along the Lake Erie waterfront and Maple Leaf Park. The subject property is designated low-density residential and environmental protection in the town's Ridgeway Thunder Bay secondary plan. The low-density residential land use designation permits single detached dwellings. Policy in the secondary plan for low-density residential areas is supportive of opportunities for infill development. The secondary plan notes that new or redeveloping lower density development can be expected to comprise smaller lot area and dimension. This makes efficient use of infrastructure while broadening choice and affordability in the low density form. 3399 North Shore Drive is within an area identified as environmental corridor and is adjacent to a significant natural area corresponding to the beach lands along the Lake Erie waterfront. A portion of the property is identified as natural hazard area along the waterfront. That's area with potential to flood from wave uprush or subject to erosion. This area is under the regulation of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. The applicant's survey sketch indicates that the hazard area for the subject property is located at the base of the shore wall. The subject property is also near fish habitat associated with Lake Erie. So at the time of the writing of the report, we didn't quite have comments from Niagara Region, but they did arrive in advance of this public meeting. So I'm just going to touch on them briefly here. Region staff notes that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial and regional plans. They noted that the region supports intensification within the built up area that makes more efficient use of designated urban land and existing infrastructure. Niagara Region is satisfied that the requirements relating to the identification and protection of archaeological resources for the subject property has been adequately addressed. So the agent for this application has completed a stage 1 and stage 2 archaeological assessment. The subject property is impacted by the region's core natural heritage system, consisting of type 1 critical fish habitat due to the parcel's proximity to Lake Erie. The subject lands are located more than 30 meters from the fish habitat associated with Lake Erie and are separated from the lake by the parcel owned by the town, that's Maple Leaf Park. As such, the region did not request completion of an environmental impact study. This is the current zoning of the subject property. It's currently zoned waterfront residential or WR zone in hazard zone or H zone. The zoning of the property is proposed to change from waterfront residential WR zone to 3 site-specific waterfront residential WR zones, 1 for each part. Part 1 and Part 3 are the proposed new lots. Part 2 is the retained lot, and the existing dwelling and detached accessory building are proposed to remain. If this zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the town will require that Part 4 be conveyed to the town of Fort Erie as parkland dedication for the purposes of widening the access laneway to Maple Leaf Park. In addition, any private land below the shore wall on the subject property will be conveyed to the town and merged with Maple Leaf Park. This will be a condition of approval of the severance application. This slide illustrates the zoning proposed for the application. So for all 3 lots, parts 1, 2, and 3, there will be a provision to permit a reduced setback from the 1 in 100-year flood elevation to 15 meters. The zoning bylaw requires a minimum setback of 30 meters. Part 1 will also contain a provision to permit reduced lot frontage of 12.48 meters. The WR zoning requires a minimum lot frontage of 18 meters. Part 2 will contain provisions to formally recognize the existing 2-story detached garage located in the front yard that has a dwelling unit above the ground floor. Planning staff note that the owner has provided the town with a legal affidavit establishing that the structure predates the zoning bylaw and is legal non-conforming. Finally, Part 3 will contain a provision to permit the existing pool and accessory structure to remain without an associated main dwelling as a temporary use for a period of 1 year following finalization of the severance. So these are a series of site photos. So this is looking at the property southeast from North Shore Drive. This is looking south from North Shore Drive towards the retaining lot, Part 2. So that's the 2-story detached garage in the front and the existing dwelling to the rear. This is looking south from North Shore Drive towards the proposed new lot, Part 1. This is the proposed lot that requires a provision for reduced lot frontage. This is looking south from North Shore Drive towards the second proposed new lot, Part 3. So this would be the lot with provisions to permit the existing pool and building on site for a period of 1 year as a temporary use. And this is looking south from North Shore Drive towards the walkway to Maple Leaf Park. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanderveen. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Lubberts and then Councillor Noyes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Redekop. Mr. Vanderveen, just going back to the slides on the frontage. It's Part 1 that they're asking for reduced frontage of 6 meters. And then
So sorry, through the chair to Councillor Lubberts. Yeah, the reduced lot frontage is being requested for Part 1, and the frontage would be 12.48 meters. The WR zoning normally requires 18 meters of lot frontage for new lots.
And what's the frontage on Part 2 and 3? I didn't see that there.
Let's give me one moment.
They exceed the 18 meters, right?
Yeah, they both exceed 18. I'll give you the values. Just give me one sec. Yeah, so Part 2, the retained lot, the lot frontage on that will be 22.15 meters. And the lot frontage for Part 3, the second new lot, is 21.5 meters.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. My concern is over the request to reduce the 1 in 100 year setback. I'm concerned with the lake levels being so high and the flooding we have had in other areas of Fort Erie along the lake shore, along some of the creeks. Why we would allow them, why would we allow a reduced setback?
Mr. Vanderveen, any comment on that?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Noyes. Yeah, I think we will be looking to our colleagues at the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority for their take on if there's any anticipated impacts to the existing dwelling or any proposed dwelling on the 2 new lots resulting from a reduction to that setback. And we will cover that in the recommendation report.
If I can continue, Mayor Redekop?
Yes, please do.
I would be really hesitant to approve reducing the setback on anything that's close to the water. We've had the last 2 years, we've had some really bad flooding and because of lake levels and rainfall and that. And I don't think we can, personally, I could not vote for something that perhaps puts the home and the property more at risk than it would be with the 100. My guess is if we didn't, they probably couldn't get that Part 1 in there. They wouldn't have enough room if they brought it closer to the road as opposed to closer to the lake. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Vanderveen.
Through the chair, Councillor Noyes, according to the applicant's sketch, they did provide a footprint of a proposed dwelling. and that dwelling does meet the 30-meter setback required by the zoning. Perhaps when the agent speaks in favor of the application, they can provide more detail on the reduction to that setback.
Councillor Noyes?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Any other members of council? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have some concerns with respect to this, as well as Councillor Noyes had noted. One of the questions that I had, though, was, and I don't know if you can bring it up, the stretch of beach that we own and the portion that you're looking to attain from them if this were to be approved in the future. Is there a picture of that?
Yeah, maybe you could put that up, Mr. Van der Veen. It's the plan. My understanding, Councillor Butler, is that we already own the waterfront south of the shore wall. What would be conveyed to the town is a strip along the easterly boundary of this parcel, which would be added to an existing walkway that we have to the waterfront.
It doesn't seem like a large portion is what I'm trying to gather. Am I correct in that assumption?
I'm going to let Mr. Van der Veen respond to that. In terms of the parkland dedication, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems rather small.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Butler, we did do some calculations. So the town is able to ask for 5% or parkland dedication based on total lot area. And that amount, as shown as on part 4, was the amount that we could ask for under the policy.
Butler?
I'm just wondering if you could translate that into the amount of footage from the east end of what we have to what we would gain. Is that possible or no?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Butler, I did do some detailed mapping of this back at the pre-consultation stage, so certainly I can look into that again further and provide you more detail in the recommendation report.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. No other questions.
Thank you. Any other members of council? Could you take that down, Mr. Van der Veen, for the moment? Any other members of council had any other questions? Mr. Van der Veen, I just, I had some similar concerns with respect to why we would waive the flood elevation setback during a time of extreme climate events, particularly storms coming off of Lake Erie. And you haven't recommended that in the information report, obviously, but what would be the factors that you would consider? I know you mentioned that we would look to the MPCA, but we actually have the ability to waive or modify or retain this 30-meter setback, correct?
That is correct. So the 30-meter setback is on top of what's identified as the hazard limit. Obviously, we'll have to have the Conservation Authority confirm that, but sort of any setback beyond that would be subject to what the council is willing to support.
And what we have to take into account is the weather, the events that we've had, and our responsibility to make sure that construction doesn't take place in an area that might provide jeopardy to the homeowner. I would think those would be some of the factors that we have to bear in mind. Would you agree?
That is correct. Yeah.
So I note that there is an encroachment for the two-story garage on municipal property. How would that be dealt with going forward? Whether there are severances granted or not, how would that go forward?
Yeah, we would, the town would enter into an encroachment agreement with the property owner to recognize that encroachment. So the footprint of the building isn't in the road allowance, but there's an overhang on the second floor, and that's actually just over the property line. That's the portion that's on the road allowance.
One of the letters that we receive is going to make a reference to some trees that are located on, I think maybe part 3. Is that something that's been looked at, or is that something that would be looked at further between now and the recommendation report?
Yeah, certainly that's something we could look at. I did notice that as well when I conducted a site visit and took a photo of part 3. That's also something we look at the consent stage, that the town arborist provides advice to staff as to, what trees can be saved, what can be taken down. So that is something we do review in detail at the consent stage as well.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of other questions. I'll save those for maybe the proponent. If there are no other questions then by members of council, then Mr. Butler, perhaps you could ask if there's someone who wishes to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Your worship, we have Matt Kernahan from Upper Canada Consultants. I'll bring him in now.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Kernahan.
Good evening, Your Worship, and members of council and staff. I think most of you know my name is Matt Kernahan, and I'm the planning manager at Upper Canada Consultants. Our address for the record is 30 Hanover Drive in St. Catharines. I'm the agent on this file, and I've made application for this zoning bylaw amendment on behalf of Cider Brothers Builders, as well as Paul and Susanna Phillip. If I might, I'm just going to share my screen. So as usual, planning staff did a very good job of providing a description of the proposal before you this evening, and I'm aware you have a full agenda, so I don't intend to take too much of your time, but I did want to spend the next few minutes just highlighting some of the important elements to our application. So as you've heard, the purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment is to facilitate the creation of 2 new lots for single detached dwellings at 3399 North Shore Drive. These new lots are shown as parts 1 and 3 on the sketch on your screen. Part 3 is a large lot which exceeds the requirements of the waterfront residential zone for both lot frontage and lot area. Paul and Susanna Phillip, who are co-applicants on this file, have commissioned Mr. Cider to build a single detached dwelling for them on this lot. Their intention is to keep the existing pool and the pool building for their future use in association with their home. Part 1 is proposed to be severed off and sold to a future owner to build a single detached dwelling on. The frontage of this lot, as you've heard, is less than the waterfront residential zone requires, but the lot area exceeds the minimum requirement. Future owner of this site and the eventual dwelling footprint is not currently known at this time. Part 2 has the existing 2-story dwelling and accessory structure on it. The intention is for the existing garage and 2-story dwelling to remain and be sold off following the completion of the zoning amendment and the future severance process. The dwelling and deck will be modified slightly in order to accommodate the future proposed lot line, and the existing tennis court will be removed from the property. Lastly, Part 4 is a 6-foot wide strip of land which will be transferred to the town to improve the existing walkway access to the beach. Town staff expressed a strong desire to acquire this strip of land as parkland, and the owners are agreeable to transferring it to them. This slide provides some more details on the proposed zoning amendment. There are a few things that I believe are important here. The purpose of the proposed amendment for Part 3 is simply to permit the existing pool and accessory structure to remain in place while and until the dwelling is constructed on this property. This is because the zoning bylaw does not permit pool houses or pools on lots that don't have a dwelling. Temporary use provision will allow them to remain, and the exception to the requirement for the setback from the 1 in 100-year flood line will legalize their existing location. The purpose of the amendment to the zoning of Part 2 is simply to permit the existing dwelling and accessory structure to remain in place, in the place that they are presently located. This is a technical amendment, as these uses have already been established as being legally non-conforming. The purpose of the zoning amendment for Part 1 is to permit the reduced lot frontage for the proposed lot. The lot will exceed the minimum requirement for lot area, and relief is not being requested for any of the zoning provisions for setbacks or lot coverage. proposed lot frontage is similar to many other lots in the area, including a number that are located along North Shore Drive, both north and south side. Lastly, the lands located below the shore protection will retain their existing hazard zoning. No development is proposed here, and no development whatsoever is proposed within the Lake Erie floodplain or the hazard zone. While the owner has requested a reduction in the setback from the hazard zone from 30 meters to 15, the NPCA, who have regulatory authority over this area, have not yet objected or required any special study. Through the pre-consultation process, they didn't identify any issues with this proposed setback. All the development associated with this proposal will be set back a significant distance from Lake Erie and the shoreline hazard associated with it. And for this reason, the MPCA didn't require any special study here. To conclude, I'd like to thank council and staff for your time this evening. My submission to you is that the proposed zoning amendment will permit the creation of 2 lots on an infill basis. This type of development is contemplated by the Ridgeway Thunder Bay Secondary Plan and encouraged by regional and provincial policy. All development will be located well outside the natural heritage and hazard areas and will not have any negative impact on them. Creation of the lots will result in the dedication of a strip of land that will be added to the town's walkway leading to the beach and will improve waterfront access for the residents of the town. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the council has.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kernahan. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Kernahan? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, through you to Mr. Kernahan. Mr. Kernahan, what is the size of the lots to the left of part 1? Like if I'm looking at the picture, what are the sizes of, let's say, the 3 lots that would be to the left of part 1? In regards to frontage.
Through Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I don't have that information at my fingertips at this time.
If I can continue, do you have, are they similar to the, because you're now asking for a reduction from 18 to 12.48. Are the lots to the left of that similar, or is this going to be an exception?
So through the mayor, councillor, as part of the planning analysis that was undertaken and submitted with this application, we did do a high-level lot analysis in terms of comparing the proposed lot to other lots along North Shore Drive, and there were a number of lots that have similar lot frontages. But specifically at this time, I can't tell you exactly what the lot frontage of the lot immediately to the east of us is.
Councillor Noyes, that's something that you can ask staff when we get to the information report.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mayor Redekop.
Anything further?
Nothing further.
Any other member of council? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Matt, thank you very much. I didn't quite hear your comments about the NPCA and why they didn't comment.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lubberts, typically the NPCA are supportive of development provided it occurs outside of their regulated area. In this instance, their regulated area stops at the greater of the 1 in 100 year floodline, wave uprush, and erosion hazard. Through the pre-consultation process, they indicated that they were satisfied that the shore protection along these lots was protecting them from the wave uprush and erosion hazard, and that the survey shows that the 1 in 100 year floodline is located at the base of this feature. So because all of the proposed development was being completed outside of their regulated area, they were satisfied not to require any study and not to object to it. The town's zoning, which requires a further setback from the regulated area of the Conservation Authority, typically, well, it goes over and above their requirements. They're typically supportive of a reduction in that setback, provided you stay out of their regulated feature. So That sort of summarizes the comments we received in the pre-application process. Mr. Vanderveen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that we're still awaiting the formal comments on the application at this time, but I expect you would anticipate them soon, given the time they've had.
Yeah, that is correct, and those comments will be included with the recommendation report.
Further,
No, that's okay. Thank you very much, Mayor Redekop.
any other members of council? Mr. Kernahan, just to leave off where Councillor Lubberts was, ultimately the municipality makes the decision as to whether we should reduce the setbacks that we require in our zoning bylaw, correct?
That's correct too, Mr. Mayor.
And if you go to the slide that shows the 3 parcels and the proposed concepts for construction of the house on part 1, there is a line, a dashed line that runs immediately south of the proposed 2-story dwelling on part 1, and then runs easterly across the other 2 proposed parcels. Is that the limit of the 30-meter setback?
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. That dashed line represents 30 meters setback from the 1 in 100-year flood line.
And there's nothing that's being proposed to be constructed within that 30-meter setback?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, not at this time. In this instance, for part 3, the proposed zoning would recognize and permit the existing pool building and the pool, as well as the amenities associated with it within that lot line, but nothing is proposed at this time.
That could be done on a site-specific basis, permitting the pool. Correct?
That's the proposal, yes.
We could still, the municipality could still maintain the integrity of the buffer with an exception for the pool, could it not?
That's correct.
The other, we've received some correspondence where there's been some concerns about short-term rental. Do you know if the existing 2-story building has been used as a short-term rental property?
Yes, it is. So the existing 2-story dwelling is currently being used as a short-term rental. Was currently being used as a short-term rental. It's recently, and it is licensed, I should add, it's recently ceased to be used as a short-term rental. The intention is that, once and if this zoning and severance process is completed, it will no longer be used for that purpose. Mr. Sider was using it as a means of financing his carrying costs for the property.
Is there, do your clients have any objection, or do you know, to having a site-specific provision that none of these parcels, no matter how many we permit, be zoned to prohibit short-term rentals?
None whatsoever. The intention is that, as I mentioned, part 3 will be occupied by Paul and Susanna Phillip, who intend to reside there. And I'm quite certain that Mr. Sider, after building them a beautiful house on part 3, wouldn't want to trouble them with a short-term rental that he owned.
Okay. And then finally, the proposed part 1 with a 2-story dwelling does seem to be a little busy. It does seem to be smaller in context with the neighborhood, and that does seem to be a large house on a smaller parcel. Any comments on that?
To Mr. Mayor, the parcel is quite large. It's just over 1,000 square meters, and that dwelling is well below the maximum lot coverage.
I suppose that's all in the eye of the beholder, Mr. Kernahan, and I don't want to argue with you, but you've got part of the parcel that theoretically will be restricted from construction because of the flood elevation. And then you've got a narrow frontage. So it's not dissimilar to my law office, which is long and narrow. It's got lots of square footage, but it's long and narrow. And that's what this is it not?
one could classify it as that, but my submission to you is there are a number of other lots along the street here which you could find a similar situation on.
Right, and we'll be charging staff with responsibility to provide us with that information when they do their recommendation report. I have no other questions. Is there any other member of council that has any questions of Mr. Kernahan? I don't see any, but if you do, could you speak up? Nope. Okay, so let's go to anyone who wishes. Sorry, Madam Clerk, did you have any emails that came in or messages that came in after the report was prepared that you wish to read into the record?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I have 4. The first one would be from Dwayne Krusty. The next
So
one would be
before we embark on that, I wonder if we could just ask Mr. Butler if he sees any of the names that Ms. Schofield is going to relate to you as being in the audience. I see that we have John Burke with his hand up. Are there, who are the messages that you've got?
Okay, so I have Dwayne Krusty, Louis Carlesso, Karen Lane, and Richard Ross.
Madam Clerk, I do have 4 names matching those. 2 are just first names, Karen and Dwayne, but it's most likely them. So
That's fine.
We do.
Okay, so they
And
don't
the
have
other
their,
2?
Lou Carlesso, as well as there's Richard Ross. Yes.
okay, so why don't we do this, Madam Clerk? Rather than you read these, let's find out who wants to address council. And if we get to the end and there are still some people who haven't addressed council, but you've got a message, we'll let you read those into the record. So what I will do then is I'll call for anyone other than obviously the proponent who wishes to speak in support of the application. Please raise your hand and we'll admit you to the meeting.
Your Worship, I'm seeing no hands raised at this point. There was one just dropped, and I'm assuming that person is speaking in objection or has questions.
Right.
So if now would be the time to raise your hand if you wish to speak in favor of this application. I'm seeing none, Your Worship.
Okay, so then let's go to anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the rezoning application. Please raise your hand and be identified and called into the meeting.
Okay, we do have some hands going up. The first one I see is from Karen. That may be Karen Lane. If I could bring them in now.
Please do.
Okay, thank you. I don't need my.
Could we have your full name and address for the record, please?
Okay, my name is Karen Lane. I live at 57 Maple Leaf Avenue South. So this is in our neighborhood and I'm in opposition to the proposal. Mainly because, well, my letter that doesn't need to be read now, or my submission, because I was concerned about the proper studies being done, first of all, and they have been. And while I don't agree with the density that it's going to create on facing onto Maple Leaf Park and the height as well that they're looking at putting in, I do believe that this neighborhood and this small park here should maintain the character that it's got. I'm hoping that the B&B ceases to operate, as the Mr. Kernahan has indicated it possibly will. Because parking has been an issue with the B&B down here, even with the 3 lots that they have to park on right now. And yeah, I just think that the density is going to create is going to take away from that like naturalized kind of park area that we've got here. And it would be a shame. It's kind of going back to the first submission you had that you discussed at length and the comments made there. Like, we're taking these beautiful little waterfront properties and we're just chopping them up because it suits a developer or it suits a person's economic interest, and it's really not taking into account the culture of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Did you have anything further?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, before you go, are there any members of council that had any questions of Ms. Lane? Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
you'll be allowed to exit the meeting, and then Mr. Butler, you can bring in the next individual.
I can, thank you. And while I'm doing that, I just wanted to remind, is that because I do see one call-in user, that if you're on the phone calling in, you can press *9 on your phone, and that will raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak to council. And the next person we have is most likely Dwayne C, I believe.
We'll find out when he arrives. Good evening, Dwayne. If you could unmute yourself and provide us with your full name and address.
Yes, my name is Dwayne Cresty. I'm at 112 Derbyshire Drive. And I guess the reason for opposing the development was more because of the rental property that's been there. The traffic level on our streets have been really taken up this summer. And the other thing is I like, similar to Karen in front of me, she talked about you're squeezing in that parcel of that building where the current tennis court is. And it is going to just simply take away from, the waterfront and the homes that are built on the waterfront. It's going to be just a cluster of what I'm concerned about is a cluster of commercial buildings where potentially they could all have, now that I know the owner is planning to stay there, that does change things. But I was more concerned at the time that you'd have 3 commercial buildings and they would be all on Airbnb. And because the traffic and the parking has been horrific around that area. So those are my major concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christie. And are there any members of council that have any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
The next person we have, Your Worship, is Lou Carlesso. Bring Lou in now.
Good evening, Mr. Carlesso. Can we have your address for the record, please?
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Louis, and I live across the street at 3404 North Shore Drive. And yeah, my concern again is just a lot of frontage size of the 12 meters there, as it's 6 meters less and 1/3 of the R1 zoning requirement. Basically, every new recent building lots that were created in this area are 18 meters wide or more. Yeah, some examples are new lots on Maple Leaf Avenue South, Lakecrest Court subdivision on the east side, Ridgeway by the Lake subdivision on the north, and the North Shore Drive Court subdivision there on the west. I support basically new residential development, and I understand some small adjustments. But if town staff and council are now accepting 12 meters lots in the Thunder Bay area, which I know they were quite strict on reducing the size, this will set a precedent in the area, and this will allow myself and others to create similar sized lots. And I've created these 2 lots here across here at 3404. And I know back then it was quite strict. They didn't want anything less than 18 meter frontage. So that was basically my concern for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlesso. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Carlesso? Councillor Dubanow, is your hand up? Your digital hand is up, I think. Or no, that's just my cursor, which is a hand. Sorry. Okay. Please end these Zoom meetings. Thanks very much, Mr. Carlesso. We appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
Mr. Butler, is there anyone else that you noticed with a hand up?
Yes, we have 2 more, Your Worship. Bring in Richard Ross now.
Good evening, Mr. Ross. You can unmute yourself, and could you provide us with your address, please?
Yes, my name is Richard Ross. We're at 47 Maple Leaf Avenue South.
Please proceed.
We've moved here little bit more than a year ago now. And we moved to this area because of its charm, because of its trees, because of the open spaces, and of course, close to the lake. When we see developers coming in and looking at opportunities such as this, it brings back memories of where we came from, coming into subdivisions. So what we're looking at here is on parcel 1 or part 1, they're reducing the frontage from 18 meters to 12.48 meters. If that's the case, is this going to set a precedent for future developers coming in? If we look to the east, there is a lot on the other side of the Maple Leaf Avenue Park that is in excess of probably 120 feet frontage. These people are from the States. In the COVID era, excuse me, that we're going through right now, these people very rarely get there. And we know that there will be a for sale sign coming on their lot soon. Instead of having 2 lots in there, they may now qualify for 4 lots. And this, if this is allowed to happen with this parcel of land being the 3399, I'm afraid that our lakefront area is going to turn into a subdivision. Really don't have a whole lot more to say than that. Karen, Dwayne, they summarized my feelings and my wife's feelings here, so I look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Any members of council have any questions of Mr. Ross? Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your comments. And Mr. Butler, number 5.
We have one hand remaining, Your Worship. John Burke is coming in now.
Good evening, Mr. Burke. Could we have your address for the record, please? Once you've unmuted.
Good evening, Council. This is John Burke from 119 Maple Leaf Avenue South.
Proceed.
So just like the other parties that are opposing, I have the same views. One of my concerns here, and just some understanding, the current garage on site has an address of 3397. Is that currently a separate parcel, or can someone explain that to me, please?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it's all one parcel still, but Mr. Vanderveen, would you know why there's a 7 attached to the end of that?
It's possible the property owner just added an address to that structure since it's detached. When simply the property is known as 3399 North Shore Drive.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So that was one concern. Is that garage on town property, or is it, how far is that off current town property?
There's a very slight encroachment and a cantilever encroachment.
Okay, so there's an encroachment on that? Okay, thank you. One of my major concerns here were also the Airbnb. We were impacted by this all summer, just like the other folks that are opposing. So currently, from what I understand, 3399 lot 2, that is no longer or can no longer be an Airbnb. And does that include the garage that was also used as an Airbnb?
Well, it's currently licensed, at least one of the parcels, Mr. Burke. And if any severances are granted, the owners of the property have indicated they're willing to have a provision that would prohibit further short-term rental use on these properties.
And what takes place, because I heard that the current owner is looking to sell all 3 parcels. What takes place when that is sold?
First of all, there's one parcel, so the severances haven't been granted as far as I know.
Correct. Correct. I'm sorry, the proposed severances.
That's
Proposed-
dependent upon, yeah, it's dependent upon the rezoning and how many parcels are actually permitted to come in. So the current parcel could be sold. Any new parcel or parcels created could be sold. If there's a change in the zoning will contain a provision that will prohibit the use of these properties for short-term rental.
Okay, great. Well, that will be grandfathered in then?
That would be part of the site-specific zoning of any parcels that are created. At least that's what I've asked. The owner seems to be agreeable to that. So I would think that going forward, that would be part of the zoning.
Okay. So talking about the 30-meter setback, as we know, we were hit pretty hard last night with a storm. I went down to the beach today just to see where the water line come. And actually underneath the pool area, it's already undermining in there. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but that's currently washing out. I know there was some armor sewn set on the beach last year to help protect that, but there is quite a void underneath the pool area. So that should be a concern. I know some of the other councils, Mr. Lubbert, Mrs. Noyes, were concerned about that. And I'm not an expert, but I agree there definitely is there's an issue there. That water has come up with the high water levels. That's come up, the last 2 years. I know we're all aware of it. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that is concerning for sure. You can see where the water, when we have a storm, you can see where the water goes, and it is north of the property line.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. That's something that staff can look into. Was there anything further that you wanted to raise with council?
I think at this time, that's pretty much it. Just like the others conveyed concerns about, taking a park setting and commercializing it. It's unfortunate. I understand that it's part of growth, but, I think the entire neighborhood would probably be opposed. The people that, it impacts on a daily basis to open up that pathway down to the beach and make it larger is probably not overly palatable for the town residents that currently exist here. Just a statement.
Could you explain that? What do you mean it's not palatable? What do you mean?
Well, currently it's a nice laneway, which kind of goes with the trees that we have in place. And if you open that up and made it like a, let's just say, Burley Road beach access or Bernard or, one of those, it's really going to, there's a lot of trees down the laneway. It's kind of a nice walk through there, and it'd be unfortunate to see it opened up. There's a fence through there. Like I said, there's trees on both sides of the laneway. So it would be, it'd be unfortunate to see a driveway approach, if you will.
I don't want to be misinterpreting what you're saying. You're not suggesting that other people from other parts of the community shouldn't have access to the waterfront through that area.
Not at all what I'm stating. What I'm stating is it's a park-like setting, and it would be nice to remain that way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. Appreciate that. Any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, through you to Mr. Burke. Mr. Burke, thank you for your presentation. And I think I understand you've been in town for about a year?
No,
Okay.
30.
That was the last speaker.
That was the last one. Okay. Well, then you can probably answer this question better. In regards to part 1 with the frontage, and so far all the speakers that are opposed to it have commented on the 12.5 meter frontage. Are there other properties? You live in the area approximately this size, or is this really out of keeping here?
So yeah, it is a little bit out of character. I was just on the Niagara Navigator, kind of just doing an overview, not looking at lot sizes, but just doing an overview comparison, and it does kind of stick out a little bit. The house next door, the house that is west of Part 1 is approximately 800, maybe 1,000 square feet home. So it is going to be dwarfed. And then on the west side of that residence, there's another laneway going down to the beach. So, it is going to be a little bit out of character for that house to the, in my opinion, again, to the west of the Part 1 or the proposed Part 1.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Any other members of council? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Burke. And Mr. Butler, is there anyone else that you see that wishes to address council?
Yes, your worship, we do have one more person with their hand up.
Okay.
That is Jason. I'll bring Jason in now.
Good evening, Jason, and could we have your full name and address for the record, please?
Good evening. It's Jason Grimoldby. I live across the street as well, 129 Maple Leaf Avenue South. Thank you for having me this evening. Going after all the neighbors already, pretty much addressed all the concerns that I wanted to raise as well. Proposing the 12.48 frontage has all been addressed. I basically just wanted to go on record to voice that I agree with all these things because I didn't have a chance to write in a letter or something like that. So I appreciate the time that you guys gave me tonight. And I think that would all be, everything's been addressed.
Okay, well, you're now part of the record.
Thank you.
Any members of council have any questions of Mr. Grimaldi? If not, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Butler, anyone else you see? Is there anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this matter?
We do have another hand raised, your worship, and that's from Richard Ross, who we've already heard from.
Yeah, I think so. Mr. Ross has already spoken, so I'm not going to be going back over this. Mr. Ross, if you have further comments, you can always send an email to members of council. Anyone else that hasn't already spoken to council?
I'm seeing no others, your worship.
Ask one more time.
And just the final time, if you do wish to speak to council, if you haven't already in opposition, or if you have any questions, now would be the time to raise your virtual hand. Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Okay, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And before we go to the next public meeting, I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break. So it's 7:57 right now. How about if we come back, let's say 8 minutes, 8:05. Okay, so we'll be back at 8:05. Okay, so it's 8:06 now. I know Councillor Butler is with us. Councillor Noyes, can you check in, please? And Mr. Vanderveen, you are going to be conducting the next application for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Worship.
That's with respect to 544 Walden Boulevard. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to commence sharing my screen. Okay. So the purpose of this public meeting is to provide information regarding the proposed combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 544 Walden Boulevard. The purpose of this application is to permit development of 2 semi-detached dwellings for a total of 4 dwelling units. The land use designation of the subject property is proposed to change from commercial to urban residential. The zoning is proposed to change from highway commercial C3 zone to a site-specific residential 3 R3 zone. The site-specific zoning will contain provisions to permit reduced lot frontage and reduced lot area. Notification of the September 13th, 2021 public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the August 19th, 2021 edition of the Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, all property owners within 120 meters were mailed the notice of complete application in public meeting on August 19th, 2021. The subject property is located in the Walden neighborhood of the town of Fort Erie on the east side of Walden Boulevard, just north of Garrison Road. The following summarizes the land uses surrounding the subject property. To the north, single detached dwellings along Walden Boulevard in a place of worship. To the south, commercial uses and vacant commercial land. To the east, commercial uses. And to the west, Walden Boulevard and single detached dwellings. The subject property is currently designated commercial in the town's official plan. An official plan amendment is required to change the land use designation to urban residential to permit development of residential uses. Semi-detached dwellings are a permitted land use under the proposed urban residential land use designation. The subject property is currently zoned highway commercial C3 zone in the town zoning bylaw. The zoning of the subject property is proposed to change from highway commercial C3 zone to a site-specific residential 3 R3 zone. The R3 zone permits semi-detached dwellings. Site-specific provisions are also required for reduced lot frontage for all 4 dwelling units and reduced lot area for one of the units. This is a site plan illustrating the proposed lot configuration of the 2 semi-detached dwellings. A site-specific zoning provision is required to permit reduced lot frontage for the 4 parcels, all 4 parcels. This application proposes lot frontages ranging from 7.8 meters to 8.1 meters. The base R3 zoning requires a minimum lot frontage of 9.5 meters for semi-detached dwellings. A site-specific zoning provision is also required to permit reduced lot area for one of the parcels, D as shown on this plan, due to the irregular shape of the subject property. The area of parcel D is 271 square meters. The base R3 zone regulations require a minimum lot area of 305 square meters for semi-detached dwellings. This is looking into the site from the east from Walden Boulevard. Currently, there's a existing detached garage on the property that's proposed to be removed. This is looking north from the neighboring property to the south into the subject property. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanderveen. Do any members of council have any questions? No. Is there anyone? Then we're going to go to the the proponent, is there anyone that wishes to address council on behalf of the applicant? Either the applicant or agent?
Yes, your worship, I'll bring them in now. I have Anthony and Ferna.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Inferna.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Anthony Inferna, and I'm the agent for 544 Walden Boulevard. I have a presentation, but it's very similar to Daryl's, so I believe I would just be reiterating what he said. But there's a couple of things I just want to point out. As someone that's lived in Fort Erie, I found this quite interesting when I was working on this. This lot was actually part of an original plan of subdivision called Plan 460. And the intent was to actually have multiple lots, residential lots for this area. I just thought that was something that was cool when I was going through it. I wanted to share that with you. But other than that, Daryl pretty much touched everything I wanted to, so I have nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Inferna. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Inferna? Question that I had, Mr. Inferna, I know that there are some numbers here with respect to the concept plan, the locations, that speaks to square footage, I think, or maybe square meterage of these units.
Yep.
Approximately how large will these units be? Square footage.
Through the chair, each unit approximately at this point is about 1,650 square feet. They're all identical. Yes.
1,650?
Yes, correct.
And are these 2 stories?
Yes.
And have you determined what the cost will be? I'm wondering whether this is going to be in the affordable range. Do you know?
I'm not the owner, but I'm sure the houses will be sold at whatever the relative market is at that time.
Thank you. Any members of council have any questions arising out of that? If not, Mr. Inferna, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, were there any submissions that you received in writing?
No, your worship, I have nothing.
Okay, then Mr. Butler, we're going to ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak other than the owner and agent in support of the application.
Your worship, yes, we do have one person with their hand raised. I'll bring in Anthony Annunziata now.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Annunziata. Can we have your address for the record, please? And I trust you've banked the money that you won this afternoon.
That's my brother, Mr. Mayor.
This is Anthony Annunziata. This is Anthony.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
So, not a problem. Not a problem.
And your address for the record?
My address. I own the property immediately to the south, the 516 Garrison Road.
Please proceed.
I just wanted to advise council and staff that I had an opportunity to review the planning justification report and found that the use of taking this from C3 commercial to residential is something that I support. And I wanted council to be aware that the intensification of residential, I think, is an appropriate use on the site. And we welcome the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Annunziata. Do any members of council have any questions of Mr. Annunziata? Thank you very much, Mr. Annunziata. I'll try to distinguish between you and your brothers in the future.
Yes, we're very similar. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the application?
So now would be the time to raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak in favor and support of the application. I'm seeing no others, your worship.
Okay, and just looking at the list of attendees, I'm going to think that when we ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition, there isn't anyone there, but if you wish to speak in opposition to the application, could you please raise your hand?
I'm seeing none, your worship.
Okay, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And that's going to take us then to the consent agenda. Could I have a mover? Are there any items in the consent agenda that anyone wishes removed? If there are none, can I have a mover for the consent agenda items? Councillor Dubanow? Are there any questions or comments with respect to any of the reports contained in the consent agenda? If not, I've got a couple of questions with respect to with respect to PDS 84 2021. There is, what are the remaining conditions? Sorry. Madam, so I guess Ms. Dolch or whomever, what are the remaining conditions that would need to be met? This is a report that would authorize pre-servicing of the subdivision, subject to a variety of things, one of which is approval from the environmental ministry, whatever it's now called. Are there other conditions that are of any concern?
Your worship, there is no major items of concern. That was our major concern. But you will note that in Appendix 4, we do have special provisions. A lot of those do include the existing conditions of draft plan approval, just to ensure that everything's met to our satisfaction that we identified in those conditions.
Right, and I note the conditions, I think it's 18 and 19, make reference to stormwater management facility, but there won't be a stormwater management facility on this plan, will there? Aren't they using the storm system?
That's correct, your worship. However, we do still qualify that as a system, even though it's not necessarily a facility, but it's a system that that stores the water in the pipes underground.
Okay, thank you. Then with respect to the next report, the River Trail Phase 2, on page 6, if I can find it, which must be this is the list of financial security and financial requirements. There is no number 1. It goes 2, 3, 4. At the bottom, it makes reference to the letter of credit, refers to 1. Is that 1 was in the original and that's already been covered and there's been no change? Is that what's occurring there? I don't know who.
Thank you, your worship. That is my understanding, but I'm going to just defer to Mr. Butler because he may have that answer.
Mr. Butler?
Your worship, I don't have that answer. I think the contents of Schedule F4 we're confident in, but we can take a look prior to execution of the agreement if there's any numerical issues in there.
Right, okay, that's great, thank you. And then with respect to the annual financial report, note 9 on the financial statement, which is on page 43, talks about the reserve and reserve funds. Will these amounts that are being proposed to be added to the reserve funds be in addition, or are they already, I'm presuming that they're not already included in the financial statements on page 43 in note 9 of the financial statements? Jonathan, is that, or Mr. Jansen, is that correct?
Those funds that are being allocated are currently part of the balance in the general levy rate stabilization reserve. So we always, by default, transfer those funds there, and then these will be reallocated out to the other various reserves.
So in the calculation of the financial statements that are part of this report, are these funds already included, or are they going to be add-ons once this report is approved?
No, they're already included in those reserve totals.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there are any questions arising out of any of those questions. If not, then I'll call the question. Sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I'm sorry you kind of faded out when you asked if we had any questions. I did have some comments about River Trail, the PDF 85-2021. I would be somewhat remiss if I did not comment on behalf of the residents that are very concerned about drainage issues, both on Baker and River Trail where this development is going in. I know the engineers have done their swales, but it's so important that these swales be maintained and that the elevation and the swales be done very well, because the residents are so concerned about the drainage and flooding in their backyard. So I just wanted to mention that, to make sure that it's we're not going to hear in 2 years from now about the backyards of the adjoining properties being wet. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, do you have any comments with respect to that? I know this is an issue that you've been looking into.
This is with respect to River Trail Part 2?
Yeah, well, I think it's in general.
Well, in general, we're, through the inspection process, we make sure that they're constructed according to plan. But as excuse me, as council's aware through the land committee minutes, we're having the issue looked at as to what happens after the town leaves the scene and the subdivision is turned over to the homeowners. Essentially, there seems to be some questions about what the town's opportunities and responsibilities are when drainage is adversely affected in that case.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Yes, Mayor Redekop, just a comment on that, and I can appreciate, Mr. Walsh, that we've been looking at the problems with backyard swales, where the people who buy the property really don't know what they are and what their purpose is. I actually got a call today, a person who bought a property who was wondering why he has this ditch in the back of his yard, as he has referred to it, and he's actually a very fortunate person because he actually has the storm grate in the corner of his lot. And I'm saying, well, you won't have a problem, but you have to maintain it. You can't fill it in because the lots are so small, like backyards are so small now. So if you happen to have a backyard that the swale happens to be on, you've then further reduced the functionality of your backyard. So because you can't do anything on the swale, but this is just an example of how someone who buys a property doesn't quite know until they're actually living there or moving in that there is a swale in the backyard. They say, well, what do I do with this ditch? And I say, it's not a ditch, it's a swale, and you have to leave it and you have to maintain it. So I don't know whether there's an education program that we should be looking at to educate people how important the swales are, and not just for your property but for your neighbors. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point, Councillor Noyes, and I'm wondering whether at some point we maybe should be looking at a condition in draft approval that requires this to be contained in, or some reference contained in the agreements of purchase and sale from the developer to the initial purchaser. But then again, the problem is beyond the initial purchaser. Any other questions of the items in the consent agenda? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in support of the recommendations? None opposed. That is carried. That then takes us to Planning and Development Services, and that's you, Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, it is, Your Worship. Thank you. Planning and Development Services is now in session. We have no presentations or delegations this evening. We do have reports. First one we have on the agenda is PDS 19-2021. That's a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 0-13365 Pettit Road. And that was postponed from the March 8, 2021 Council and Committee meeting. And that was previously moved by Councillor Zanko. So that report is on the floor again for questions or comments from council. Your Worship, I see your hand.
Based on the interoffice memorandum that we received, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move that we postpone consideration of this report until the developer has provided updated studies and the information previously requested by council.
Sounds good, Your Worship. I did see Councillor Lubberts' hand up. I'm just wondering if that was what Councillor Lubberts was also planning, or if he had a comment just before we go to the postponement, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment on the previous item on our agenda for delegations. We did receive an email from legal counsel for the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, and they were requesting that council reconsider the refusal for them to be a delegate tonight.
I don't have it on the agenda, Your Worship. I didn't make, or sorry, Councillor Lubberts, I didn't make that decision. So I'm Madam Clerk.
I was contacted to have that delegation, which they could not do because they were wanting to speak to a public meeting that had been declared closed. I advised them accordingly. I believe what they are requesting, and perhaps the mayor can step in as well, is that they're looking for deferral of part of the secondary plan decision.
So I think what we need to do is deal with the motion to defer or postpone the report that's on the floor. We have a Crystal Beach secondary plan report that's going to be forthcoming. And at that point, we can have a discussion about what the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club wants. But I think we're out of order right now. So
Yeah, I completely agree, Your Worship.
let's go back to the motion to postpone.
Yep, absolutely, Your Worship. The mayor has requested that this be postponed. Was there any discussion of timing on this, or are we leaving it open-ended with regard to waiting for information?
We have deferred this on several occasions now, and we still do not have the information. So I believe staff's position, and certainly my view, is that we postpone it until the developer has provided the updated studies and the information that we had previously requested. And at that time, staff can advise us and put the matter back on the agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any other members of council have any questions or comments with regard to timing? Okay, so I'm seeing none, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of postponing? All right, so that's carried. So moving right along, that takes us now to PDS. Sorry, my apologies. PDS 81-2021. That's a proposed combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 4197 Niagara Parkway. Do we have a mover for that?
I'll move it to put it on the floor, Mr. Chair.
So his worship is moving that. That's now on the floor for questions or comments from council. Councillor Noyes, I'll go to you. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. I think all of us can appreciate that the residents surrounding this proposed lot and the existing house no longer feel safe in their neighborhood because of the tragedy that occurred. I'm pleased that the owner is going to allow to be put in the zoning in the site specific that short-term rentals are no longer going to be allowed in the current property or the new property. So I'm glad to hear that. I think it will give the residents some relief. I'm still concerned about the size of the house being somewhat out of character with the other homes, and I'm hoping that there can be some meeting of the minds to reduce the size of the house. And I guess those are my comments, but I am glad that the owner and the agent have worked with the town and our requests on behalf of the residents in regards to frontage and side setbacks and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Your worship.
Pleased that the owners are agreeing to a number of requests of the neighbors in terms of side yard setback, in terms of the short-term rental prohibition. I'm a little puzzled by their resistance in the communication that we received about the setback insofar as the site plan identified 15 meters. And it may be that they don't want to have the 15 meters put into the zoning bylaw, but it seems to me that that's entirely consistent with the existing home on the property. And so I'd be looking for that setback. That's a pretty uniform setback along the parkway. So I'd be looking for that in a recommendation report. You know, part of the problem here is that this parcel is within the urban boundary, and it's in an area where this severed parcel, if approved, would meet most of the requirements already discussed. So that's what I'm looking for, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any other members of the council, questions, comments? All right, so I'm seeing none, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes. Thank you.
Oh, for opposed.
I thought everyone's hand went up. I could ask, anyone opposed? Oh, Councillor Butler. My apologies, I didn't see that. Thank you, Your Worship. It still does pass though. So moving along to PDS 83, 2021. That's proposed, sorry, I apologize. PDS 82, 2021. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 3399 North Shore Boulevard. Can we get a mover for that? Councillor McDermott. Your Worship.
Yes, so I'm glad to hear that whatever we do here, the owners are amenable to a short-term rental prohibition. But I can't imagine why we would waive, with all of the storms that we've had over the past number of years, including Halloween 2019, I think earlier this year. I can't imagine why we would be tinkering with the flood elevation setback. Number one. Number two, I happen to think that part one is a little cramped. I don't think it fits in with the neighborhood. I would ask staff to provide us with some data with respect to lot sizes in the vicinity. There may be a few. I know one of the speakers that addressed us spoke about the new created lots all being 18 meters. Not sure if that's correct or not, but staff can provide us with some information on that. So I'm interested in where this goes. I think we need to deal with the encroachment of the garage, number one. Number two, I think staff needs to take a look at that pool to see whether we should even be considering that for some type of setback modification. But barring that, I would think I'm quite comfortable with setback, and I'm a little concerned about the size of proposed part one, and I'm further concerned about the size of the house that would be on that lot if we were to contemplate granting a rezoning to permit a severance of a parcel that size. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. I just want to concur with Mayor Redekop. I have the same concerns in regards to the lot frontage and the size of part one. And also there's no way I could ever support anything that's going to limit or minimize the setback for the water. The elevation for the can't remember what it's called.
The 100 year, I think it's the 100 year.
Yes, the 100 year setback. Like this last 2 years, if it's taught us anything, it's taught us that we have to do more, not less, in regards to protecting the properties close to the waterfront. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Councillor Lubberts, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I agree with the mayor and Councillor Noyes, and especially on part one with the reduction, 30% reduction in lot frontage. And, we've gone through a lot of exercises, with waterfront plans and in different areas in Fort Erie. And I'm hoping that council stays with what we have in our waterfront residential frontages at 18 meters. And so I hope that the owners can come back and maybe just have the part two and part three in their future proposals and remove part one.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. Councillor McDermott, Councillor Butler.
I'll just say that
Yeah,
I tend to agree with what everybody's saying. I mean, I think that has to be protected, and I think we'd be crazy not to do it. So I would like to see that in the final product for sure.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Butler.
I agree with everybody's sentiments as well. I think that it's problematic in and itself. So I'd like to see some changes to it.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other questions or comments from council? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. So we'll move along then. We're now at PDS 83 2021. That's the proposed combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 544 Walden Boulevard. Can I get a mover to put that on the floor? Councillor Butler. Any questions or comments from members of council? All right. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Okay, that one I think I can say is unanimous and carried. All right, so we'll move on now to PDS 86 2021. This is the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan Proposed Official Plan Amendment number 54 and related zoning bylaw changes. Councillor Lubberts has that on the floor. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just going back to what I was stating earlier, we did receive information from the council of the day, and I'd just like to get some clarification and a little explanation from the clerk on the delegations and the rules of procedure. I think that the legal counsel for the Tennis and Yacht Club did speak at the public meeting, but my interpretation of the rules of procedure is when delegations speak at council meetings, and we have two separate sections in our rules of procedure. One is public meetings. Anybody attending a public meeting can speak and address council, and then delegations is a separate section where if you want to be a delegate, you register at the proper time. So I'd just like to get some clarification on where and why the delegate was refused.
Madam Clerk.
If you can give me one moment, please, I'd just like to bring up the rules of procedure so I can quote the section.
That's okay, yeah. Yeah, public meetings is 4.8.
No, this is section 9.
Pardon me?
I'm just going to go to section 9 under delegations.
All right, okay.
Section 9.10, matters subject to a statutory public meeting. A delegation is not permitted on any matter that is the subject of a future statutory public meeting or a statutory public meeting which has been closed. The public meeting, the statutory public meeting that we're dealing with was closed on June the 21st. So no further delegations are permitted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Lubberts, does that answer the question for you?
Yeah, but now he's requesting to be a delegate on a report. I don't get the difference.
The report is a product of that public meeting, though. Right? At least it's what I understand from the clerk.
Yes, it's subsequent to. So it's a statutory public meeting that was held on June 21st. It was declared closed after everyone spoke to it. which is including this gentleman, the lawyer for the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club. And according to the rules, no one can speak after that. They're certainly welcome to contact councillors and mayor, but not to come to council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That seems pretty cut and dry to me, Councillor Lubberts. Was there anything else you would like to add, or any other questions or comments about the report?
If I can remember correctly, they did speak. They had their legal counsel at the public meeting. He did
Yes,
speak.
they did. Oh, sorry, Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yes, they did. They had their opportunity to speak at the public meeting. That doesn't mean that they can speak again after.
So now he's entitled to speak at the report, right?
No.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah, please, Your Worship.
So our former lawyer advised us when we hold a public statutory meeting and the meeting is closed, no further delegations are to be entertained by council, because if any one delegation was entertained by council, that really opens up the whole public meeting again, but the public meeting has already been closed. So on those issues, that's the end of it. And the letter that Mr. Whoever sent in, the lawyer, covers issues that were raised and could have been raised at that public meeting. So that's not in order. We know what they're asking for. They want part of the plan to be deferred, and we can discuss that. But yeah, it's not appropriate. So the clerk has ruled on that, and that's clear.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I didn't go as far as 9.10. Thank you, Madam Clerk. If I may, Mr. Chair, one of the things that, like, I did speak with the new president of the Tennis and Yacht Club and her counterpart, and they are asking that we defer a piece of their property from this report. They don't want to stop the moving forward of the secondary plan. Don't get any, I don't want anybody to think that, but they have a deadline of April of next year to make an amendment to their site plan agreement regarding their garbage disposal. And that's in progress. And now with the secondary plan, their concern is that the secondary plan, if we move forward the way it's written, it's going to interfere with their opportunity to make those amendments, because we're going to be approving something that they are obligated to change. So it's my understanding that it wouldn't be a big problem to defer their piece of property from the secondary plan, and we can move forward with the secondary plan as planned. And then there won't be no delays in the secondary plan. But if not, when I'm reading this letter, it looks like they may be forced to appeal, and that would delay the process. And that's something I don't want to see. I don't want this being delayed. I would like this to be approved tonight and moved forward. But I'd like to make an amendment that we defer their pieces of property that they're requesting to have deferred from the secondary plan just until April of next year, April 1st.
I'm open to having that amendment. Do you want to put it on the floor now? Because I think I saw Councillor Noyes' hand up, and she may have a comment on that.
Yeah, I'd like to put that on the floor, but I also like to hear from Ms. Dolch if it's feasible that we can still do that.
Yeah, that's a fair
I don't want to
question.
interrupt the secondary plan at all. I want it to move forward. I want everybody to understand that.
Ms. Dolch, is this even possible to proceed with the secondary plan and then leave a portion of it out?
Through you to the councillor, you can consider the deferral of that area. From town's planning staff perspective, obviously we put our recommendation forward. We think the designation that we're proposing as medium density is the most appropriate. So we're pretty firm on that stance, but only because, and I can explain the rationale behind why we chose medium density for that portion, rather than the core mixed use that they're requesting. The core mixed use was all the way up through to Derby Road and around the circle, and core mixed use went all the way down Erie. We limited the core mixed use areas because we were trying to condense the core, because there was so much commercial land within Crystal Beach. We were trying to condense the core and provide more residential units to support that core. So this goes a long way in supporting that objective. So that's why we've recommended it the way we have. In terms of the garbage enclosure, it is located at the end of that parcel that they're referring to. There is some discussion about them having to build a roadway to that. We're open to obviously considering the roadway being relocated, things to change. I don't think that would interfere with the designation of the property, however. But again, you do have that ability to defer it if you wish.
Thank you, Ms. Dolch. Councillor Lubberts, you want to put the amendment on the floor right now?
Yeah, because Mr. Chair, if I'm afraid if we don't, and I don't want to get into a lengthy and a costly appeal by LPAT, because we all know that LPAT is behind schedule as it is, and just look at what's going on at the Harbor Town. It's been years, and it's still sitting, waiting to be heard. Whereas a deferral of this property can still move our secondary plan forward. We can avoid an appeal. Now, the Tennis and Yacht Club, from what they told me over the weekend, is they feel confident that they can resolve their issues by April 1st. And that's all they're asking for, is just their piece of property till April 1st. If it's not resolved, and if we can't come to any conclusion, then the secondary plan moves forward. So I'd like to put that on the floor, Mr. Chair.
Madam Clerk, just for clarification, if we're deferring only a specific part of this, does this go back to the rules of procedure where it would only allow a debate on timing? Because I'm concerned other members of council may not have an opportunity to comment on the deferral of a specific section and the merits of that in regard to what Ms. Dolch had said. So I'd be inclined to hear from other members of council before we dealt with that. But I'm asking you for guidance on this procedurally.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll hold back on my deferral. I'll allow council, and then when everybody speaks, I would like to put it on the floor. Thank you.
It's fine, Councillor Lubberts. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Your worship.
Yeah, I just have a few questions, but I'll start with the request by Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club. I mean, this isn't, this is the third year of this process. We've had this before us frequently, and there have been public open houses. There have been reports to council. They're all referred to in this particular report. So I'm a little surprised that it's being floated that they didn't have an opportunity. They did provide, I guess, some comments. Their views of what should happen with their parcel obviously do differ from what staff is recommending to us. And so I'd like to know, if I could, Mr. Chair, from the Director of Planning, what her preference is with respect to how we would deal with the request of the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club in the context of the entire matter, and whether deferring their parcels of land to next April, which is many months from now, has any impact on the ability of staff to move forward with a CIP in the area.
Good question, Your Worship. Ms. Dolch?
Thank you. Through you to His Worship. In terms of, I'll answer the last question first, because probably that's the most important on everyone's mind. With the deferral of this property, we would identify it on a map if you put that forward to us tonight. We'd identified it on the map as a deferred area, and we would have to deal with it later on. It wouldn't delay that CIP process for the rest of the community. Should we not defer it, obviously, and it go forward and get appealed, the same thing could occur at the local board level or at the Ontario Land Tribunal level. What happens in that case is when we do get to the tribunal on the issues and what the issues are, we can separate out that issue and still allow the rest of the secondary plan to go forward. So in both cases, it allows the secondary plan to go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Stoltz. Your worship?
Right, so the town is recommending that this be medium density, I believe, as opposed to what you now believe the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club wants, which is core mixed use. Is that correct, Chair?
I believe so. Ms. Stoltz, you want to confirm that?
Through you too, His Worship. That's correct. That's my understanding. They're looking for the core mixed use designation. They feel it's the highest and best use for their property.
And so, if I might, Chair, if we were to defer this, the purpose of the deferral would be to have some discussions about whether we move in the direction of Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, which is not your or your staff's recommendation. Is that correct?
Ms. Stoltz?
Through you too, His Worship. That's correct. We've stated our reasons on why we're limiting the core mixed use. As I've indicated before, we've removed some core mixed use designation through this public process. And to add some back in would be problematic for us.
So there'll be discussion one of two ways, and based on what you've said, Ms. Dolch, if I might share. The first is, if we were to defer this, there will have to be some discussions and negotiations. Why it would be April of 2022, I'm not sure why it would have to wait that long. Surely they've got some ability to deal with it sooner than that. The other option is that if we were to proceed without a deferral and they were to appeal, then you would be asking for it to be separated from the consideration by LPAT so that the balance of the secondary plan could proceed. And again, there'd be some discussions. Either way, the only unknown factor is whether or not Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club would appeal. If they don't appeal and we were to proceed without removing this parcel, then the whole thing proceeds. So I guess, Mr. Chair, my question to Ms. Dolch, without wanting to put her on the spot, but putting her on the spot, is what's your preference?
Ms. Dolch?
His Worship, my preference is to continue and deal with the matter, obviously, at the board level. And my reasoning for that is only because I don't know if we will resolve their concerns that they've addressed tonight in terms of core mixed use versus medium density. I think in any event, if that comes back forward, planning staff would still be in a position to support that medium density when they're asking for core mixed use. So I don't know if it resolves the issue. In terms of the garbage and their concerns over garbage, definitely we can work with them on that. There is a site plan, as they've indicated. We can work with them on that should they wish to relocate the road on that site plan to accommodate medium density along the frontage. If that's what they're looking for and that's their concern, that's something easily rectified by planning staff.
And if I might share, just for clarity on that waste disposal aspect, that can be dealt with regardless of what happens. I mean, it's an issue that needs to be dealt with and will be dealt with regardless of whether we defer a part of this secondary plan or whether we proceed with all of it. Is that correct?
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to His Worship, that's correct. Currently, the site plan that's in place for the garbage enclosure, there's a road pattern in there that they're following to access to that far garbage enclosure. Again, that's something that can be modified and rectified easily through other means if that's the main issue.
Finally, Chair, just with respect to this point, I believe what Ms. Dolch is saying is that we could defer the parcel on Erie Road adjacent to the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club for the purpose of having discussions. Those discussions might not end up in an accord between them and the town, in which case council would have to make a decision as to whether we stick with staff's recommendation or not, at which point the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club could appeal in any event. So that not only are we dealing with a potential appeal following tonight's meeting, by maybe not only Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, maybe by some other property owners, but we would be deferring that decision until April of next year, May by the time we deal with the report, and then an outstanding appeal at that point. So I don't really see, I tend to agree with Ms. Dolce's thinking on this. And so I'm probably not going to support a motion to defer this, because I think we need to deal with it. We can, in good faith, have discussions with the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, but if we accept the recommendations in the report, we know what staff is advising us. Either we agree with that or we don't agree with it. I had a couple of other questions, if I might. I know I'm taking up a fair bit of time, Chair, but
no, please proceed, Your Worship.
I note that all of the medium density properties, particularly in the northern part of the planning area, call for multi-unit residences, either condominium blocks or townhouses or semi, I don't even know if it's semis. There's no single family dwellings provided for in any of those additional medium density areas. And I'm just wondering whether there shouldn't be some accommodation for houses, even if they're smaller houses of 1,000 or 1,100 square feet or smaller in those areas. They could be on smaller lots, and wonder if Ms. Dolce could comment on that.
Yeah, Ms. Dolce.
Thank you. Through you to His Worship. So I'll explain it on two fronts, that point, and why we excluded single detached dwellings from the medium density. One, we wanted to try to diversify the housing stock. In Crystal Beach, we do have a lot of small lot singles, 30 by 80 foot lots, and we wanted to provide a little more diversity in terms of age in place. Hopefully we'll get some apartments, small level apartments, to help the affordability issue that's growing in Crystal Beach quite steadily. The other issue is density. We do need to pick up a certain amount of density within the Crystal Beach area, in accordance with the guidelines and the number that we've ascertained from the region in terms of our growth numbers. So with that growth number, obviously, if we start decreasing that density by allowing some singles, the singles may not necessarily meet those density targets that we're envisioning. In some cases, it may. Some of them are medium density, envision a density of 25 to 50. That may be conducive of some lower density type development, but the majority of them are higher density, between 50 and 100, and we're trying to get that density increase where we took it away from the core area of Crystal Beach. And we did start to move some of that density into other key pockets near commercial core areas. So that was our reasoning.
Okay, thank you. I can accept that, particularly if I'm wanting to believe that this will provide also some portion of affordable housing in the area. I don't know whether that's going to be accomplished, but I think we should be looking at all the tools available to us to ensure that if there's new development, that there's some type of affordable component to them, particularly if we're doing only medium density development. My final question, Chair, on page 131, which is a map that talks about active transportation. There are bicycle lanes and what have you, multi-use trails or cycling network, what have you. When it comes to regional roads in this area, would the region be paying the multi-use trail costs or the barriers, buffered bike lanes? Would they be paying the costs if it's their roads?
Ms. Dolce?
Through to His Worship. In terms of the plan, obviously the active transportation, a lot of time it's a guide for when development occurs. They identify that bike lanes may be required, other things like that. And the region may look to developers to provide some funding towards that, or they may do that when they look at that roadway when they redo their road in accordance with what we've envisioned. So it would be at their cost for the regional road portion. If they were to redo that road, they would look at what we were envisioning for that piece.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Before I go back to you, Councillor Lubberts, were there any other members of council who had any questions or comments? Okay, I'll go back to you, Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a couple other things to go over, but getting back to the deferral, Ms. Dolch, I understand. I get the whole idea about dealing with this right now, but if there's an appeal and we ask LPAT to deal with these properties separately under the appeal, do we get to do that immediately, or does the appeal go to LPAT and then they have to wait before they consider whether they're going to look at it? And is there a delay on our part while we're waiting for LPAT to make their decision as to whether they'll deal with it separately? Is there a wait period for us?
Ms. Dolch?
To the councillor, there is a bit of a, obviously when an appeal is launched, we do have to get together the record, send it off to LPAT, then they schedule that first case management conference. As part of that first case management conference, that's when we ask for that separation to occur. So there is a bit of a delay in there because we do have to send the records to the board at that time.
And how long would that take?
It's tough to say. Usually we'd pull that together, our appeal record, within 30 days, send it off to the board. And usually the case management conference is scheduled pretty quick within a couple months of that. And then we would have that separated out. The hearing itself would take some time to schedule, yes.
So we could avoid that delay? I mean, if there's an appeal, there's going to be a delay no matter what. So we could avoid that delay right now if we defer and give everybody time to sit down and discuss their problems or their arguments. And then by April, we can move forward. If there's, at that time, we're going to be asking for the separation, but we can still move forward with everything between now and April. There's no delay between now and April. And their deadline is April to make their amendments to their site plan. And I understand where Mayor Redekop's coming from about, we've dealt with these, with the Tennis and Yacht Club, but, they're telling me that they just had their last annual general meeting. They changed the board and the new board wants to resolve these issues. They understand that, it's been a few years and these things need to be dealt with and they need to be resolved. And they're saying they're confident that they can get everything done by April 1st. And that's why, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put this on the floor, but.
And I'll give you that opportunity. I'd actually like to ask some questions of Ms. Dolch, but I'll go to Councillor Noyes first because I see her hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. I can understand Councillor Lubberts' position. I just wish I could have a crystal ball and look into it to see if these are the only people that would appeal. Then it would make sense to follow Councillor Lubberts' suggestion. But again, we could defer this particular section and still end up with other individuals and entities that are opposed to the official, to the Crystal Beach plan too. So then we're going to, you're kind of going to be running down two streets. If I knew that this was the only objection to this, I could support Councillor Lubberts' position because it makes sense, but we may not be any further ahead if it's going to be appealed by another entity. We would still have to go through the delay as Ms. Dolch explained, and then we may still have to go through another delay if by April they have not come to a meeting of the mind. So I'm somewhat perplexed about this because I think there's too many unknowns to go that direction. I think maybe we should approve the plan wait for the appeals and follow the process. Because I think we're going to be there anyway, whether it's this organization or another organization.
You kind of actually brought up the issue that I was going to ask Ms. Dolch, which was, is there anything preventing anyone else from appealing and putting us in that exact same situation? And then I get the gist of it, that anyone could appeal and we could be exactly in the same situation. Councillor Noyes, was there anything else you had?
And that was all. Thank you.
Okay. I have one other question before and I'm just wondering if any other members of council, Ms. Dolch, I'm just wondering if we do defer this, specifically for the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club, from what you've already explained to us here, it's planning staff's opinion that this should be what you've selected, which is the I believe it was medium density, and I may be wrong there. Say we do postpone this until April. What is the likelihood that planning staff would change their mind and support core mixed use for the property rather than the what you've already selected right now, which is medium density residential?
Thank you, Chair.
I apologize for putting you on the spot. I know it's an awkward question.
Oh, no, it's a very fair question. And generally, as I indicated previously, the decision to make this property medium density was well thought out. And the reason I would hesitate to say that I could, have further discussions with Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club is the plain fact that when we went down this public participation process from the beginning, there was a big concern about the amount of commercial in that core area and that it needed to be, condensed. And we did remove some permissions from other people, removing them from core mixed use. And I would struggle with adding an additional without that same level of public participation that occurred when people had it removed. This isn't something we contemplated before. It hasn't been vetted through the public. And again, that's where my concerns would lie.
Thank you, Ms. Dolch. That's actually, that answers the question for me. Councillor Lubberts, I'll go back to you. Do you want to put the deferral on the floor?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I get what Ms. Dolch is saying, but I would prefer that we try to do what we can to delay any appeal process happening now. I'm not confident that LPAT is going to move that fast for us to separate the issues. So I'll put the motion on the floor that we defer their properties until April 1st of 2022.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, Chair, if I could just have some clarity for the purposes of this amendment. I've heard the Crystal Beach Tennis and Yacht Club lands, and I've also heard the parcel next to it. So just so I get the right wording, is it all of their lands or no?
I believe it's part 14 on schedule A1-5, which is on page 134, is it? Sorry, 134. I think that's what we're referring to.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
All right, so that is that
either Ms. Dolch or Mr. Wasserman should confirm that.
That's actually a good point. Ms. Dolch, Mr.
Yes,
Wasserman?
That is correct.
Okay.
It is part 14.
Thank you. Just for my clarity, is this an amendment or is this a postponement?
This is a deferral.
A deferral of that section? Okay. So in that case, are there any questions or comments with regard to timing from members of council? All right. So I'm seeing none. So I'll call the question then on Councillor Lubberts' deferral of this particular item. All those in favor? Opposed? So that's defeated. So we'll go back to the original report. Before I go to you, Councillor Lubberts, you've spoken quite a bit. Any other members of council? Councillor McDermott, Councillor Butler? Okay. I'll go back to you one more time, Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Dolce, I got a phone call from Drew Valley. He owns the property on Repstock Road. And the discussions that we've had previous to the secondary plan was he wanted to build a house. And he was told if he had his application in before the secondary plan was approved, then he would be able to move forward with his application. He informs me that the application was submitted. And I'm wondering if you've seen it or if you've talked to your staff, and is he okay with moving forward?
Ms. Dolce?
To the councillor, I did speak with staff on this. He did submit the application. There is a couple of things he needs to still submit to make it a complete application, but he's very close. So my understanding is building staff spoke with him today to discuss the missing items, and he'll be getting those to us quickly. So we will have those in place, and I'm monitoring that application because I do know obviously before the 20-day appeal period's up, we need to make sure that this is moving through the system.
So if he submits everything tomorrow, he'll be okay? Providing everything is there?
Ms. Dolce?
Through to the councillor, if he submits the additional information that the building staff requested, yes, and my understanding is it's minor information and it's very close to being a complete application. So it should be probably by the end of the week is what I'm assuming.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Final call for any members of council, your worship.
Yeah, just on page 24 of the report, it's appendix 3, it's agency comments. I note that the region has offered to assist with urban design guidelines. Do we need their help?
Good question, your worship. Ms. Dolce, do you care to comment?
Through you to his worship, and obviously the region, they can provide comments if they like, but we do have a member of staff, Mr. Wasserman, who is very skilled at urban design, and he is going to be working on those urban design guidelines. So I do know that he's well-versed in urban design from his experience. So I do feel confident in what he can provide to us.
Understanding, Chair, and I'm very grateful that we've got Mr. Wasserman on board.
I completely agree. I've seen his work. It's fantastic. I think that's why I wonder, the same as you, your worship. All right, final call for anyone else who has not spoken yet. Councillor Lubberts, I said I was going to go to you one more time. I've given you plenty of opportunity. I'm going to call the question unless anyone else has any.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to comment that I want to thank staff, and I want to thank everybody that participated in the secondary plan, public meetings and open houses and focus groups and everything. And from people that I've spoken to in the area, everybody's very, very happy with what they see in the secondary plan. And I look forward to moving forward with it. And I just want to reiterate that I wasn't trying to delay the process of approving it, but I just wanted to give the new board at the Tennis and Yacht Club an opportunity to resolve the issues. And I wanted to avoid an appeal. And I hope the appeal doesn't happen.
Those are good comments to cap this off before we call the question, your Councillor Lubberts. So I am going to call the question now. All those in favor? And I'm making sure it's unanimous, so that passes. So that finishes up then with reports this evening. Any new business or inquiries from members of council this evening? Any questions related to the business status report? Your worship.
I just note that there seems to be a lot of reports coming on October the 4th, including a couple of public meetings, at least I think both of which will be lengthy. So I'm hoping that staff will take a look and make sure that whatever needs to be on the 4th is on the 4th, and if it can be deferred to the next week, it is. Because that's just planning. I don't know what else is on. I guess we'll find out.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Dolch, did you got the ability to help me out that evening?
We will definitely do our best. I am aware of the amount on the agenda. We have been talking as staff on what we can remove. A number of items do need to go forward that are of importance. So we will be looking at it in light of other reports, and hopefully IS doesn't have any reports at all.
I appreciate your efforts, Ms. Dolch. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe I'm out of line here, but I just wanted to ask if Ms. Dolch knew when we could get started with these CIPs once the secondary plan gets approved.
That would have been for new business, but I'll let you go ahead now.
Yeah. Do we have any timeline as when we could get started with them?
Through to the councillor. Obviously, we do want to start them right away. Peter will be working on those as soon as possible. Really, even in the event there's an appeal, we'll start to be looking at those in any event.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the business status report from council? Well, in that case, I graciously return the chair to you, Your Worship, just as it starts lightning and thundering and my dogs are going crazy upstairs.
Yeah, that's an ominous sign. Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. That takes us to infrastructure services, and that is that Councillor Lubberts?
Yes.
Councillor Lubberts, you're on.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure services is now in session. We have no presentations or delegations. We have report IS 39/2021. That was 10th Street ditching assessment that was postponed from August 9th, 2021. It was originally moved by Councillor McDermott. That report is back on the floor for any comments or questions. Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't in attendance at the last meeting when this came up, but I've had some limited discussion with the residents in the area, and I'm getting the feeling that this is a no-win situation. No matter what option we choose, it's almost like half the residents are going to get the benefit and the other half are going to be left holding the bag with the ramifications. And if we pick a different option, it's just going to shuffle around who gets the benefit and who gets the ramifications. I do think something needs to be done with that street. I just, honestly, at this point in time, I'm not sure what it is. And I think whatever we do is not, at least right now for this time, when you have new driveways that have gone in, I think there may be a better way that we can deal with this, at least in the interim. I'm almost wondering if we should just table this, but I want to have the opportunity for other members of council to speak before I put that on the floor, because I'm torn on this. I really am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mayor Redekop.
I'm thinking the same thing, and I'm thinking the reason that this was deferred was for there to be some consultation with the public, because I'm thinking that the cost of option one is pretty significant, and I don't know that it's going to accomplish what we think it might accomplish. And I tend to agree with Councillor Dubanow that this is going to be a mixed bag. There'll be some people that'll be somewhat happy. There'll be some that might be very happy, although I don't know which ones. There'll be some that will be not happy, and maybe some really not happy. So that I think deferral makes a lot of sense for staff to take a further look at something that might be less expensive, but might be more meaningful, nowhere near the cost, without disrupting new driveways, but maybe finding some mechanism to moderate the grade in some of the areas where it's significant without really bringing in the heavy equipment and doing what heavy equipment does. So I would be supportive of a tabling motion, a deferral.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. My comment on this is I did go down to 10th Street and the ditches are deep and steep in some areas on one section more so than the other. But I can take any of you guys to several areas in town that the ditches are similar. And I've had several complaints, particularly in the Black Creek, Douglastown area, about the ditches and them not being able to maintain them, particularly as the owners of the homes are getting older. I've had clients over the years, and I've had a chance to touch base with Mr. Walsh, that basically this was before you had those lawnmowers that you have to hold the pressure on for them to go. That basically would tie ropes to their lawnmowers and lower the lawnmower down and then pull it up just to do it. You can't do that anymore on the new, because if you release the pressure, it stops. But I have confidence that we're not going to have ditches like this in the future. And I think as we go along and repair roads and do urban, bring them to urban standards, or redo the roads, and that would be the time to look at the ditch and to do as much remedial work as we can to limit it. So I'm not going to be in support of this report. I'm not sure whether tabling is going to bring us anywhere, but I'd probably support a tabling motion. But I think that the staff have done a good report in regards to what they can do with what they have at hand. And unless we're looking at tabling it for a significant length of time, I don't know what else staff can bring to us, other than maybe in 10 years when we redo this road, that we're going to be bringing it to urban standards. So those are just my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Dubanow, did you want to bring a deferral notice?
Actually, I want to move that we table this. Oh.
Yeah, Madam Clerk.
I would just like to be careful, Chair, with the terminology. Tabling is much different than postponing.
Yes, and my intent is actually to table this, because my understanding is if we table it, council then can decide when to bring it back at a point in the future. Because I don't, at this point in time, I don't know when the appropriate date to even set would be. And that's why I'm hoping to table it.
Well, Councillor Dubanow has put it on the floor to table it. I guess there's no debate, just a matter of call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. That brings us to new business and inquiries. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that through you to the director, Mr. Walsh, if you could tell me when the calming report is coming out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're expecting a draft version of the report at the end of September. It's not on the business status report yet, but we do expect it before the end of the year as a final report to bring before council.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because this past weekend, there was a child that was almost struck by a vehicle on Pleasant and Bethune. And we're just trying to, I guess, calm the fears of that neighborhood, that we are looking seriously at doing some things. They would like a four-way stop. So the quicker we can get a copy of that report, obviously, would be better for us. Thank you.
That it, Councillor Butler? Mr. Walsh, are your lights going out over there? I see you're flickering in behind.
I may have popped up Google Maps.
Yeah, okay. Any other new business or inquiries? Seeing none. Business status report, any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services is now in recess. I'll turn the chair back over to Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lubberts. That then takes us to corporate services. Councillor McDermott.
And thank you, Your Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We don't have any presentations or delegations tonight. Could use a mover for EDTS 03-2021 report for the proposed housekeeping amendments to Schedule 13. Mover? Councillor Noyes, thank you. So any comments or questions? Councillor Noyes?
Well, thank you, Councillor McDermott. I think the EDPC did a pretty good job in the housekeeping amendments and some of the changes, particularly, I don't have it up on my screen right now, but where if there's a penalty or demerit points, the demerit points are not just on the property, but they're also on the individual, which prevents the individual, let's say Mr. Jones, from getting his demerit points and then buying another piece of property to do the same thing. So I was very pleased to see how they've tightened up some of the rules and kind of saw some of the loopholes. And I think this will give our bylaw officers much better guidance to hopefully improve the situation, because I don't know about the rest of council, but I've been receiving many complaints about short-term rentals, illegal rentals and things like that. And people's concerns that it's going to happen in their neighborhood. If it's not happening in their neighborhood now, they're very worried it's going to happen when they hear other places with short-term rentals, that it's going to be coming to a neighborhood close to them. So I do know that in October, I think we're looking at it, the short-term rental policy. I think there probably will be a number of changes to make sure that our current residents are much more comfortable and much more protected. But anyway, I will support this, and I think it was a very good job. Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, staff, for making the changes. On part 1, the application, I guess it's on page 2. I don't see where there's occupancy limits that are put on the dwellings, and is it somewhere else in the report? Whereas, like, if you have a 2-bedroom house, you can have 4 people, 3 bedrooms, 6, 8 people, whatever it is. Are we going to have an occupancy limit that's included in the license?
Kimberly, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Through you to the councillor. Currently, there is no occupant limits in the short-term rental bylaw, but that may be something that council wishes to consider when changes are considered at the October meeting. But currently, there's no occupant limits in place.
Thank you very much, Carolee. Mr. Chair, can we ask staff to maybe make some recommendations? Because I think one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing and some of the biggest complaints that we're getting is, people are renting and they think they're renting to 4 people, and then 16 people show up to the house. And I think there's a problem there. So I'm not sure if there's something we can do, but when you bring a report back in October, can you consider that? And
you can consider that for October?
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I guess it just adds on to the occupancy limit. And I think if our bylaw officer comes to the residents and they're over their limit, I would think that they would need to know who is in the house that is supposed to be there, who's actually renting or being there for the short term, so that if their contact person is called, for instance, the contact person would say, well, we rented it out to these 6 people. Anybody else would have to leave because they would be the agent. And to add to that, I think some of the problems that I've heard was when we call the contact person for the rental unit, sometimes they're not answering, especially 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And if their contact person can't be reached, and it states in the report that they have an hour to respond, that in their license or some kind of an agreement that the bylaw officer can act as the agent to ask the over capacity people to be removed from the property.
Point of order, Chair.
And I'm just wondering if we can do that. I don't know if we can do that legally or not, but.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Mayor?
So this is all beside the point. We're going to be receiving a report in October. I think the comments that Councillor Lubberts has made are helpful to staff to get an understanding of some of the issues we're going to deal with, but this is really part of what we're going to be discussing on the 4th. What we've got before us is a housekeeping amendments recommended by staff to get us through, to clarify some of the uncertainties in the existing bylaw, to get us through to whatever we do after October the 4th. So I think we should be confining discussion this evening to what's in this report.
Well, can't we make amendments to this report, Mr. Chair?
Well, this would probably be better at the October meeting when we're discussing it in a wholesome way.
Yeah, but
we are really dealing with the language, basically language here. The next meeting is where the meat of the act comes. So we're going to be listening to more delegations who are going to be talking about everything from soup to nuts. I think that's probably the time to entertain what you're asking.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we're being asked to approve the proposed housekeeping amendments. So I think that council can amend the proposed housekeeping amendments and ask that staff add them or consider them. I don't think that I'm out of order.
Well, I don't think that there's anything that staff isn't going to consider with regards to this whole deal. I mean, you know, this isn't something that's just going to take 1 month and it's going to be over. This is going to be a continuous flow until we get to the point of where we got to go. So I think what we do is we take the easy night, considering our housekeeping, the housekeeping things that we have to, vote on. And then in October, we all move on together. And then it's not like that, your question is going to be ignored. It's going to be dealt with, but at the October meeting. It really plays a part in the housekeeping amendments, as the mayor said.
All right. Okay, Mr. Chair, then why don't I do it this way? I'm just asking staff to take notes and then in October, make those changes in October. Either way, whether you do it now or October, I don't think it really matters.
Well, I think they, I think they take note of your vociferousness with this issue, and that, it's going to be considered.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Mayor, or Mr. Chair, I don't think that it matters whether I make the suggestions today or next month. I don't think it's out of order to make any suggestions at any time, especially when everything is under just proposed housekeeping amendments.
Okay, so I'll ask this one question. Ms. Grummett, did you note Councillor's concern?
Yes, I have noted them.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Do you have anything further, Councillor Lubberts?
No, I'll wait till October.
Okay. Anybody? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I just wanted to ask a question in regards to this report. Now, this we're approving the housekeeping tonight. Are we then going to be getting, and then we're going to be getting a bylaw? But if we approve this report tonight, the improvements or the clarification, particularly the new 7.5, where basically right now, if there's a penalty notice, they can continue to rent because they don't have a hearing. So there's a time delay, and the problem continues to exist till there's a hearing, which could take some time. And under this clarification, under the housekeeping amendment, it becomes immediate. So this will then fall into place when it becomes a bylaw, and it's coming back to us next week.
Ms. Grummett?
I believe that the confirmatory bylaw will come back next week. Perhaps maybe the clerk can confirm.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, the bylaw would come next week, September 20th.
And thank you for that. I think, again, it really tightens up a lot of the loopholes, and I think it will really help those who are having problems with short-term rentals that live next to them. If someone can have a short-term rental and they can say, well, you know, I'm going to wait for the appeal, or I'm going to wait for this, and they can continue to rent them, then we haven't really helped them at the time. So I'm really looking forward to this bylaw coming forth next week so we can implement those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My internet is unstable, so I may lose you in a few minutes, but I did want to ask a question with respect to any consideration given to tightening up when a complaint is lodged through the police and the disconnect between the ability for bylaw to act on it. That was raised last week with a meeting that I had with some of the people that have been experiencing some problems on short-term rentals units in their street, on their street. And they called the police, but bylaw couldn't act on it. So I wonder if maybe you could look at that for future reference.
Ms. Grimmett, I see you're taking notes. So I take it that you're getting all this.
Yes, I've noted that.
Thank you.
Anything more?
No, that was it. Thank you.
So does anybody else have, yes, your worship.
Thank you. Just to follow up, the problem for staff was that if the police were responding, the bylaw staff weren't necessarily getting the particulars of the complaint, which could possibly be a penalty, which the town could then utilize for the demerit point system. So that was the disconnect, and that's something that we can work on. I had a couple of questions with respect to some clarity on the intention of the revised 5.2, which appears on page 4. The response from, so the comments talks about the demerit points need to attach to the property, and says at the bottom that the demerits will then be imposed on the new property if the short-term rental owner sells and buys a new short-term property. So then it's not really attaching to the property, it's attaching to the owner. And that seems to be how 7.7 works out. new 7.7. So are we wanting to attach the penalty to the demerit points to the property or to the property owner? And if it's to the property owner, how do we catch a situation where the property is sold from an individual to a corporation or from one corporation to another corporation, and the demerit points follow the owner, not the property?
Through you, Chair, to His Worship. So the intention is that the demerit points live with the owner, but for the purposes of the AMPS program in our system, they have to attach to the property. So we put in the new provision 7.7 so that the demerit points will follow the owner should they sell their existing short-term rental and purchase a new short-term rental. And we're going to work with digital services to hopefully create a program so that we can track when there is a sale from an individual to a corporation through the actual short-term rental address property. So we are hoping that we can create an internal system to track that should there be a change.
And if I may, Chair, do we require if it's a corporate owner, do we require particulars of who the officers, directors, shareholders are?
That's correct. We do require that information.
Okay. And then there was some comments from Ms. Sturton with respect to the town being named as an insured. I understand the rationale for that. I happen to think that the municipality could get pulled into a legal case if something were to occur at a short-term rental, if we've licensed them. Is there anything that requires the owner to indemnify the municipality from any claims? And if not, is that something that could be considered?
Was that directed, Ms. Sturton?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to His Worship. There could be the possibility of adding an indemnity clause to the bylaw as opposed to maintaining the additional insured requirement. I think Your Worship has correctly pointed out that that would be a more responsive way to mitigate or transfer the risk that arises from claims against short-term rentals that have been licensed by the town. That sort of claim would ordinarily fall outside additional insured coverage, but it would fall within the scope of an indemnity clause if appropriately drafted.
Right. So I wonder if perhaps then that's something that we could look at when we get the report in October. Thank you very much, Chair. Those are my questions. I'm going to support this.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but just out of curiosity. Last week I spoke with a short-term rental owner, and he informed me that he's been in contact with several other owners and licensees, and they were going to form a short-term rental association. And they wanted to work with the town, and they were going to ask the town to recognize them. And I'm just wondering if anybody from economic development has been contacted. And if not, if they would like him to contact them to discuss what their plans are as far as their association. Have they been contacted by any members of economic development?
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, yes, we have been contacted, and I believe the group is also registered as a delegation for the October 4th meeting.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Is there anything else to this or call the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carry. So do we have any new business inquiries? Seeing none, anything on the business status report? Your Worship, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Scheduling of meetings. Any meetings that anyone wishes to inform us about? If not, then Councillor Dubanow, I'm going to call on you to do the honors.
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to move that council and committee adjourn at 9:45 p.m.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone.